The night Grant Hale found a stranger standing in his kitchen, feeding his starving children, he reached for his rifle before he recognized the smell of actual food cooking for the first time in 14 months. His 8-year-old daughter hadn't cried in over a year. His son had stopped asking when Mama was coming home. And this woman, this complete stranger, had somehow gotten both of them to sit at the table like a real family again. He should have thrown her out immediately. Instead, he lowered the gun and asked the question that would change everything. Who the hell are you? Stay with me through this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The frontier didn't forgive mistakes, and Evelyn Mercer had made plenty. She'd won $43 at the Mill Haven Baking Contest, third place for her apple butter tarts, which the judge called acceptable if unremarkable, and she'd immediately spent 17 of those dollars on a pair of boots that actually fit. The rest went into her left boot, tucked beneath the inner sole where no one would think to look. Not that anyone looked at her much anyway. The late afternoon sun beat down on the plains like punishment as Evelyn walked the rutted road heading west out of Mill Haven. West toward what? She couldn't say. Away from what? She knew exactly. Away from the bakery owner who'd offered her work in exchange for room and board, before his hand found her waist and his breath found her neck. Away from the boarding house that wouldn't rent to a woman of her proportions without a male relative vouching for her character. Away from the church ladies who'd smiled with their mouths while their eyes inventoried every perceived flaw. Evelyn had stopped looking in mirrors 3 years ago, right after her husband Thomas died, and she realized no one would ever look at her the way he had again. She was a large woman, not tall, barely 5'4", but broad-shouldered and heavy-set, with thick arms and a solid frame that had once felt powerful when Thomas wrapped his arms around her from behind while she kneaded bread. Now it just felt like proof of everything wrong with her. Too much woman, not enough grace, the kind of body that made people assume things about her appetite, her laziness, her worth. The dress she wore had been let out twice. Her face was round and plain, marked by a scar along her left cheekbone from a childhood accident involving a horse that hadn't wanted to be saddled. Her hands were calloused and rough. Her hair, a dull brown threaded with premature gray, hung in a simple braid down her back. She'd learned to move through the world by making herself small in every way except the one that mattered. The road stretched empty in both directions. No other travelers. No wagons. Just Evelyn and the persistent wind that never seemed to stop out here, like the land itself was trying to blow people away. She'd been walking for maybe 4 hours when she first heard it. A cry. Thin and high-pitched. Almost animal-like, except there was a desperation to it that raised the hair on her arms. Evelyn stopped walking. The wind died down for just a moment, and she heard it again. Definitely a child. And not just crying, wailing. The kind of sound a kid makes when they're past upset and into genuine distress. She scanned the horizon. About a quarter mile off the road, barely visible against the darkening sky, stood a ranch house. Small, weathered, the kind of place that looked like it was held together by stubbornness and not much else. Smoke should have been rising from the chimney at this hour, but the sky above it was clear. The crying came again, carried on the wind. Evelyn's first instinct was to keep walking. Other people's children weren't her problem. Other people's ranches weren't her concern. She had $26 in her boot and a long way to go before dark, and getting involved in somebody else's trouble never ended well for women like her. She made it another 50 feet before she stopped again. The crying hadn't let up. If anything, it was getting worse, more frantic. "Damn it," Evelyn muttered, turning toward the ranch house. The walk across the scrubland took longer than it looked. The ground was uneven, studded with rocks and patches of hardy grass that caught at her skirts. By the time she reached the house, full dark was maybe an hour away, and the temperature was already dropping. Out here on the plains, spring nights could still freeze a person solid if they weren't careful. Up close, the ranch looked even worse. The porch sagged on one side. Several windows were covered with canvas instead of glass. The door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. The whole place had the exhausted, defeated look of a home that had given up on being cared for. The crying was coming from inside. Evelyn climbed the porch steps carefully, testing each board before putting her full weight on it. She knocked on the door frame. "Hello? Anyone home?" The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by a shuffling sound and then silence. I heard someone crying, Evelyn called through the door. Just want to make sure everyone's all right. More silence, then a small voice, female, young. Go away. Can't do that, Evelyn said. Not until I know you're safe. We're fine. Doesn't sound fine. A long pause. Then, my pa's not here. I figured. That why you're crying? Another pause. I wasn't crying. That was Noah. Noah, your brother? Yes. How old is Noah? 4? And how old are you? Silence. I'm not going to hurt you, Evelyn said gently. I promise. I just want to make sure you and Noah are okay. It's getting cold out here, and the door opened a crack. A pair of eyes peered out at her, dark eyes, red-rimmed from crying despite what the girl had claimed. A thin face streaked with dirt, hair that might have been blonde under all the grime, pulled back in a braid that was more knots than plait. You're really big, the girl said. Evelyn had heard worse. Yeah, I am. You gonna let me in, or are we having this whole conversation through a crack in the door? The girl studied her for a long moment, then pulled the door open wider. The inside of the house was worse than the outside. It was cold. Genuinely cold. The kind of indoor chill that meant the stove hadn't been lit in hours, maybe days. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room all at once, and every surface was covered with the evidence of a household that had stopped functioning properly. Dishes piled in the dry sink, clothes draped over chairs, a thin layer of dust over everything that wasn't actively being used, and in the corner, sitting on a blanket that had seen better days, was the source of the crying. A little boy with the same blonde hair as his sister, his face blotchy and red, his small body shaking with cold and exhaustion and hunger. He couldn't have been much past 4 years old, and he looked at Evelyn with eyes that had already learned not to expect much from the world. Jesus, Evelyn breathed. His name's Noah, the girl said defensively, and I'm Lydia. We're fine. Pa will be back soon. When'd he leave? Lydia's jaw set stubbornly. This morning. And when'd you last eat? We had breakfast. What'd you have? Lydia's eyes slid away. Bread. How much bread? Enough. Evelyn looked at the little boy again. He'd stopped crying when she came in, but he was watching her with an intensity that made her chest hurt. Not scared of her, just desperately, achingly hopeful. She'd seen that look before. On stray dogs. On beggars. On her own face in the mirror during those first terrible months after Thomas died, before she learned to stop hoping for things. All right, Evelyn said, setting down her travel bag. First thing we're going to do is get that stove going. Then we're going to see what kind of food situation we're working with here. That okay with you, Lydia? The girl's face flickered with something, relief maybe, or suspicion, or both. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm doing it anyway. Pa might not like strangers in the house. Well, your pa isn't here right now, is he? And you've got a 4-year-old brother who's shaking from cold and hunger, so I'd say we've got bigger problems than what your pa might or might not like. Lydia flinched slightly, and Evelyn immediately regretted her sharp tone. The girl was 8 years old, maybe, and clearly doing her absolute best to hold together a situation that no child should have to manage. I'm sorry, Evelyn said, softer now. That came out wrong. I'm not mad at you. You're doing real good, Lydia. Better than most adults could do. But you don't have to do it alone right now, okay? Let me help. Lydia's lip trembled. For just a second, she looked like the child she actually was. Then she swallowed hard and nodded. Evelyn got to work. The stove had been cold so long that the kindling had absorbed moisture from the air. It took her 20 minutes of patient coaxing to get a fire going, feeding it tiny pieces of wood until the flames caught and held. While she worked, Lydia hovered nearby, watching every move like she was cataloging it for future reference. Noah never moved from his blanket, but his eyes followed Evelyn everywhere. Once the stove was heating, Evelyn investigated the food situation. It was about as bad as she'd expected. A small bag of flour, maybe a third full. Some lard gone slightly rancid. A few withered potatoes in a bin. A jar of preserves with about 2 spoonfuls left at the bottom. That was it. No eggs. No meat. No fresh vegetables. Barely enough to keep 2 children from starving, and clearly Lydia had been rationing it so carefully that barely was doing heavy lifting. When's the last time you had a real meal? Evelyn asked. Lydia's silence was answer enough. Evelyn checked her own supplies. She'd been traveling light, some dried beef, half a loaf of bread she'd bought in Millhaven, a small sack of cornmeal, an apple that had seen better days. Not much, but combined with what was in the house, it might be enough. All right, she said, rolling up her sleeves. We're making soup. She put water on to boil, then diced the potatoes, carefully cutting away the soft spots, and added them to the pot along with most of her dried beef and a small handful of the flour to thicken it. It wouldn't be much, it wouldn't be good, but it would be hot, and it would be food. And right now, that was what mattered. While the soup cooked, she tackled the bread situation. There was just enough flour left for a small, sad loaf if she supplemented it with cornmeal. She mixed the dough quickly, shaped it, and set it in a pan near the stove to rise while the soup finished. The whole time she worked, she was aware of Lydia watching her. The girl had positioned herself at the table, sitting ramrod straight, hands folded in her lap like she was afraid of taking up too much space. You can help if you want, Evelyn offered. I don't know how. How to cook? Lydia shook her head. Mama tried to teach me. I wasn't very good at it. There was something in the way she said mama, past tense, loaded with grief, that made Evelyn pause. Where's your mama now, honey? She died. Lydia's voice was flat, factual. The voice of a child who'd learned to report tragedies like weather. Fever took her last winter. Her and the baby both. Evelyn's hand stilled on the wooden spoon. I'm sorry. Pa says she's in a better place now. That's what people say. Do you believe it? Evelyn looked at this small, serious girl who was asking questions no 8-year-old should have to think about. I don't know, she said honestly. I'd like to. But mostly I think dead is just dead, and the people left behind have to figure out how to keep going. Lydia considered this. That's what Pa's doing, figuring out how to keep going. By working himself to death and leaving you to raise your brother alone? The words came out harsher than Evelyn intended, but Lydia didn't flinch this time. Instead, she lifted her chin. He's doing his best. I'm sure he is, but his best is still leaving you in a cold house with no food. We have food. Lydia, you had flour and potatoes. That's not food. That's ingredients, and not enough of them. We manage. Managing isn't the same as being okay. For a moment, Lydia's carefully maintained composure cracked. Her eyes filled with tears, and her voice came out small and broken. I don't know what else to do. Evelyn crossed the room and knelt down in front of the girl, putting them at eye level. You don't have to know what to do. You're 8 years old. You're supposed to be playing and learning and being a kid. You're not supposed to be keeping your brother alive while your daddy works all day and all night. Someone has to. Yeah. And right now, that someone is me. So you're going to sit there and you're going to let me finish this soup, and then you and Noah are going to eat until you're full. Understood? Lydia searched her face, looking for something, dishonesty, maybe, or cruelty hiding behind kindness. Evelyn held her gaze steadily. Finally, Lydia nodded. The soup was done about 20 minutes later. It wasn't good, thin and underseasoned and more water than substance, but it was hot, and it was protein and vegetables, and when Evelyn ladled it into bowls and set them on the table, the way both children stared at them made her throat tight. Go on, she said gently. Lydia picked up her spoon with careful, deliberate movements, took a small sip, swallowed, then took another, and another. By the fourth spoonful, she'd abandoned all pretense of control and was eating like she'd been starving, which she probably had been. Noah was different. Evelyn had to carry him to the table, and he wouldn't eat until she took the first spoonful herself, showing him it was safe. Even then, he ate slowly, methodically, like he wasn't quite sure the food was real and might disappear if he ate too fast. Evelyn watched them eat and felt something crack open inside her chest. Some locked-away place she'd been keeping carefully sealed since Thomas died. Some part of her that still remembered what it felt like to be needed. She forced herself to look away, to focus on slicing the bread that had somehow managed to rise despite everything. It came out dense and heavy, not terrible, not good, just adequate, and she buttered it with the last of the rancid lard and set it on the table. The children ate like they'd never seen bread before. By the time they finished, full dark had fallen outside. The temperature was dropping fast. Evelyn fed more wood into the stove and tried not to think about how little was left in the woodpile outside. Tried not to think about how these children had been rationing not just food, but warmth. Tried not to think about what would have happened if she'd kept walking past the house like her common sense had told her to. Lydia helped her clear the dishes, or tried to, moving in slow, drowsy motions that said the food and warmth were finally catching up to her. Noah had already fallen asleep at the table, his head pillowed on his arms, making small, snuffling sounds. He should be in bed, Lydia said. So should you. I have to wait for Pa. I'll wait for your Pa. You get some sleep. But, Lydia. Evelyn kept her voice gentle but firm. You've been taking care of your brother all day. You've been taking care of him for longer than that, I'd bet. Tonight, someone else is handling it. Go to bed. The girl's resistance crumbled. She nodded, then hesitated. What if Pa gets mad that you're here? Then I'll deal with your Pa. That's not your worry. What if he tells you to leave? Then I'll leave. But not until morning, and not until I know you two have had breakfast. Deal? Lydia studied her face for a long moment, then nodded again. Okay. She showed Evelyn the bedroom, one small room with two narrow beds, both covered in blankets that had been mended so many times they were more patched than original fabric. Evelyn carried Noah in and tucked him under the covers. He didn't wake up, just curled into a tight ball and kept sleeping. Lydia climbed into her own bed, still watching Evelyn with those serious, too-old eyes. Are you staying? She asked quietly. Tonight? Yes. What about tomorrow? Evelyn didn't have an answer for that. She'd been planning to keep moving west, to find work somewhere, to stay invisible and unattached and safe from the kind of hoping that got people hurt. We'll see what tomorrow brings, she said finally. Lydia accepted this non-answer with a small nod. Thank you for the soup. You're welcome, honey. It was good. It really wasn't, but Evelyn appreciated the lie. Get some sleep. She left the bedroom door cracked open and returned to the main room. The stove was still putting out heat, and she fed it another log before settling into one of the chairs at the table. Her travel bag sat by the door where she'd left it. $26 in her boot. A long road ahead. She should leave. Should sneak out before the father got home and questions started getting asked. Should protect herself the way she'd learned to protect herself over the past 3 years, by not staying anywhere long enough to matter. But those children, those hungry, cold, desperately trying children. Evelyn leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. The house creaked around her, settling into the cold night. From the bedroom came the soft sound of Noah's sleeping breaths. She'd wait for the father, make sure he knew what was happening with his kids. Then she'd leave. Probably. Marshit. The door opened just after midnight. Evelyn had been dozing in the chair, but she came awake instantly at the sound of boots on the porch. Heavy footsteps. A man's tread, exhausted and unsteady. The door swung open and a figure filled the doorway. Tall, well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, dressed in work clothes that were stiff with dirt and dried sweat. A hat pulled low over his face. He stopped when he saw her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the man's hand went to his belt, where Evelyn now noticed he wore a gun. "Who the hell are you?" His voice was rough, deep, the kind of voice that had forgotten how to sound anything but tired. "My name's Evelyn Mercer." She stood slowly, keeping her hands visible. "I was passing by on the road. Heard your children crying." "My children?" He said it like he was testing the words. Then his gaze went past her, scanning the room, taking in the warm stove, the clean dishes, the smell of food that still lingered in the air. His hand dropped away from the gun. "Where are they?" "Sleeping. Fed and warm and sleeping." He moved into the room properly now, and in the lamplight Evelyn got her first real look at Grant Hale. He was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s maybe, dark hair that needed cutting, a face that might have been handsome once but was now haggard and worn, carved hollow by grief and exhaustion. Dark stubble covered his jaw. His eyes were bloodshot and shadowed with the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. He looked like a man who'd been running on nothing but willpower for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to actually rest. He walked to the bedroom door and stood there for a long moment, just looking at his sleeping children. Something in his shoulders shifted. Not quite a sag, but a release of tension he'd probably been carrying all day. When he turned back to face her, his expression was unreadable. "When's the last time they ate?" he asked. "Before I got here? I'm guessing breakfast. Maybe. They said they had bread." His jaw tightened. "There was flour. They know how to make—" "There was barely enough flour for one small loaf," Evelyn interrupted, "which I made, along with soup from what little I could scrape together. Those children were hungry, Mr. Hale, really hungry." He flinched like she'd slapped him. "I left money for supplies." "Money doesn't help if there's no one to go buy the supplies. How old is Lydia? 8? She's—" He stopped, rubbed a hand over his face. "She's capable. She's a child. A child trying to keep herself and her brother alive while you work yourself to death doing whatever it is you do all day. I'm keeping this ranch running, keeping a roof over their heads. A roof doesn't mean much if the people under it are starving and freezing." Grant Hale stared at her, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. For a moment, Evelyn thought he might yell, might tell her to get out, to mind her own business, to stop judging things she didn't understand. Instead, he pulled out a chair and sat down heavily, like all the strength had just run out of him. "I know," he said quietly. "I know they're not okay. I know I'm not—" He stopped, started again. "After my wife died, I thought if I just kept working, kept the ranch going, kept us alive, that would be enough, that everything else would sort itself out. And it hasn't." He looked up at her, and there was something raw and honest in his eyes that made her want to look away. "I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to be enough for them, and I'm failing, and I don't know how to fix it." Evelyn should have offered platitudes, should have said something comforting about how he was doing his best, how things would get better, how the children just needed time. Instead, she told him the truth. "You can't be two parents. You can't work a ranch alone and raise 2 kids alone and keep a house running alone. Something's going to break. Probably you. What else am I supposed to do?" "I don't know. Hire help. Find family. Ask the neighbors." "There are no neighbors. The nearest ranch is 8 miles east. My brother's up in Wyoming running cattle. And hired help costs money I don't have." "What about town? Church ladies? Someone who—" "Town is 12 miles. The church ladies think I should remarry and get the children a new mother." His voice turned bitter. "They've got suggestions, several of them. Nice young women from good families who'd be happy to take on a widower with a ranch and 2 kids. I've had 3 proposals in the last year." "But you haven't accepted." "No." "Why not?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because my kids already lost one mother. I won't bring someone into this house who doesn't actually want to be here. Won't make them live with someone who's just performing the role." Evelyn understood that. She understood it more than he probably realized. "So instead you're all slowly starving and freezing," she said. "We're managing." Your 8-year-old daughter used that exact same word earlier, right before she started crying because she didn't know what else to do. Grant's face crumpled. Just for a second, his carefully maintained control broke, and Evelyn saw the full weight of what he'd been carrying. The grief, the guilt, the crushing responsibility of trying to be everything to everyone while falling apart inside. Then he pulled himself together, shoving it all back down where it lived. "Thank you," he said roughly, "for feeding them, for staying until I got back. I'll pay you for the food you used." "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" That was the question, wasn't it? What did she want? 3 years ago, she could have answered that easily. She'd wanted a home, a husband who loved her, maybe children someday. A quiet life where she was valued for something beyond her appearance. She'd had that briefly with Thomas. Then he died, and she'd learned that the world didn't have much use for widows who didn't fit the proper mold. Too big, too plain, too much of the wrong things and not enough of the right ones. So she'd stopped wanting things, stopped hoping, stopped letting herself imagine any future beyond the next town, the next temporary job, the next place she could rest before moving on. But standing here in this broken-down ranch house, with 2 sleeping children and a desperate father and the smell of soup still in the air, she felt something stir, some old, buried part of herself that still remembered how to want. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I was just passing through, heard the crying, stopped to help. I wasn't planning on anything beyond tonight." "But?" She met his eyes. "But those kids shouldn't be alone tomorrow either, or the day after that. Are you offering to stay? Are you asking me to?" Grant looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since he'd walked in, taking in her size, her plain face, her worn clothes, her calloused hands. Not the way most men looked at her, with disinterest or disdain or poorly disguised disgust. Just looking, assessing, trying to figure out who she was and whether he could trust her with his children. "I can't pay you," he said finally. "I can offer room and board, a place to sleep, food when there is food, but I can't pay wages." "I don't need wages. I just need to not be walking anymore." "Why were you walking?" "Because it's what I do. Keep moving. Don't stay anywhere long enough to cause problems or give people reasons to ask questions." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that usually end with me leaving town." He absorbed this. "You in trouble with the law?" "No." "Running from someone?" "Just running." He nodded slowly, like this made sense to him, like he understood the impulse even if he couldn't act on it himself. "If you stay," he said carefully, "it's just to help with the house. The kids, the cooking and cleaning, that's all." "That's all I'm offering." "I won't. I'm not looking for—" "Neither am I." The relief on his face was almost painful to see. "Okay, then if you want to stay, you can stay." "For how long?" "As long as you want, as long as you can stand it." He gestured around the house. "It's not much. House is falling apart. Money's always tight. The kids they're struggling, and I'm not—" He stopped, tried again. "I'm not easy to live with. I work too much. I forget to talk sometimes. I'm probably not going to be good company. I'm not here for company." "Why are you here?" Evelyn looked towards the bedroom where the children slept, thought about Lydia's two serious eyes and Noah's desperate hope, and the way they'd eaten soup like it was a feast. "Because they needed someone," she said, "and I was here." It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a grand declaration. It was just the truth, plain and simple, the way everything else about her was plain and simple. Grant nodded. "Okay, then." "Okay." They stood there for a moment, two exhausted people making a deal that probably wouldn't last a week, but might keep everyone alive until then. Then Grant moved toward the bedroom, pausing in the doorway. "There's a spare room," he said without looking at her. "Down the hall. Bed's not much, but it's warmer than the barn." "I'll take it." He nodded and disappeared into the bedroom with his children. Evelyn gathered her bag and found the spare room. It was small, barely big enough for the narrow bed and a single chair, and cold, since the stove didn't reach this far. But the bed had blankets and the door closed, and it was a roof over her head that didn't come with wandering hands or judgment. She set her bag down, pulled off her boots, leaving the money inside, and lay down on the bed fully clothed. Through the walls, she could hear Grant moving around in the children's room, the low murmur of his voice, too quiet to make out words. A small sound from Noah. Lydia saying something. A family trying to piece itself back together. Evelyn stared at the ceiling and wondered what she'd just agreed to. Wondered how long she'd last before the old urge to run kicked in. Wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake by stopping it all. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was the way Noah had looked at the soup, the way Lydia had finally let herself be a child for just a moment, the way Grant's face had broken when he realized how badly he was failing. She'd stay, at least for a little while, at least until they didn't need her anymore. Talk. She woke before dawn to the sound of Grant already moving around the house. His footsteps were quiet, practiced at not waking the children. But Evelyn had always been a light sleeper. She pulled her boots back on and emerged from the spare room to find him dressed for work, filling a canteen with water from the pump. "Coffee?" he offered, nodding toward the stove where a dented pot was heating. "Please." He poured them each a cup. The coffee was weak and bitter, but it was hot, and Evelyn wrapped her hands around the tin cup gratefully. "I'll be back around sundown," Grant said. "There's more flour in the barn. I can bring it in before I'll get it?" He looked surprised. "It's a 50-pound sack." "I can manage." His eyes traveled over her again, reassessing. "Yeah, I bet you can." It wasn't quite a compliment, but it wasn't an insult either, just an acknowledgement of fact. "There's eggs in the chicken coop," he continued. "Hens haven't been laying much, but you might find a few. Milk cow's name is Rosie. She's overdue for milking, but she's mean. Kicked Lydia last week, so I'll handle it." "You sure?" Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Mr. Hale, I grew up on a farm. I know my way around livestock. It's Grant. What? Call me Grant. Mr. Hale was my father. All right, Grant. She tested the name. Felt strange in her mouth, familiar in a way that made her uncomfortable. I'm Evelyn. Evelyn. He nodded. Then, after a pause, thank you for staying. Thank me when I've actually done something useful. You already did. He drained his coffee, set the cup down, and grabbed his hat. I'll see you tonight. Then he was gone, out into the pre-dawn darkness, and Evelyn was alone in the house with 2 sleeping children and a long list of things that needed doing. She started with the stove, feeding it wood until it was hot enough to cook on. Then she went hunting for that flour. The barn was in slightly better shape than the house, which wasn't saying much, but she found the flour right where Grant said it would be, along with some lard that wasn't rancid and a small container of salt. She hauled the flour back to the house, then went looking for the chicken coop. The hens were scrawny and irritable, but she found 4 eggs, which felt like a fortune. The cow, Rosie, was indeed mean, eyeing Evelyn with deep suspicion and swinging her back leg warningly when Evelyn approached with the bucket. None of that, Evelyn said firmly. I'm here to help, not hurt, but I will smack you if you kick me. Rosie seemed to understand the tone, if not the words. She allowed the milking with only token protest, producing maybe half a bucket of milk. Not much, but enough. By the time Evelyn got back to the house, the sun was rising and Lydia was awake, standing in the main room looking lost. Morning, Evelyn said. Lydia stared at her like she'd forgotten someone new was here, or like she'd half convinced herself last night was a dream. You stayed, she said. I stayed. Why? Because your father asked me to. Lydia processed this. For how long? Don't know yet. We'll see how it goes. Evelyn set the milk and eggs on the table. You know how to make breakfast? A little. Good. You can help me. They worked together in silence, Lydia watching every move while Evelyn showed her how to crack eggs without getting shell in the pan, how to slice bread evenly, how to fry everything in a little lard until it was golden. It wasn't much of a lesson, but Lydia absorbed it like she was memorizing holy text. Noah woke up halfway through and appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. When he saw Evelyn, he didn't seem surprised, just walked over and stood next to her, watching the eggs cook. You stayed, he said, echoing his sister. I stayed. Are you going to leave? Not today. This seemed to satisfy him. He climbed into a chair and waited patiently while Evelyn and Lydia finished cooking. Breakfast was eggs and fried bread and milk that was still warm from the cow. Simple. Basic. But the children ate like it was a feast, and when Lydia looked up at Evelyn with something that might have been the beginning of trust, something in Evelyn's chest loosened. Maybe she'd made the right choice after all. Maybe, just for a little while, she could stop running and let herself be needed. Just for a little while. The first week passed in a blur of work that never seemed to end. Evelyn had forgotten how much labor it took to keep a household running, or maybe she'd just blocked it out after Thomas died and there was no one left to cook for, clean for, care for. Now it all came rushing back, the endless cycle of meals and dishes and laundry and mending and 1,000 other small tasks that added up to the difference between surviving and actually living. The house fought her every step of the way. The stove smoked if you didn't tend it just right. The pump outside froze every morning and had to be thawed. The floorboards were so warped that water pooled in strange places when she mopped. Half the windows were just canvas stretched over frames, which meant the wind came through no matter what she did. But slowly, grudgingly, the house started to respond. She scrubbed the floors until her knees ached, washed every dish and put them away properly instead of letting them pile up, aired out the musty blankets and patched the worst holes, found a broom with half its bristles missing, and swept away months of accumulated dust and dirt and despair. Lydia watched everything with those serious dark eyes, cataloging each task like she was building a manual for survival. Sometimes she helped without being asked, folding laundry, wiping down the table, keeping Noah occupied while Evelyn worked. Other times she just stood nearby, a silent presence that somehow made the work feel less lonely. Noah was different. He'd attached himself to Evelyn with the uncomplicated certainty of a 4-year-old who'd decided she was safe. He followed her from room to room, chattering about nothing and everything, holding up rocks and sticks and dead bugs for her inspection like they were treasures. Look, he'd say, presenting a particularly smooth pebble. It's shiny. Very shiny, Evelyn would agree, scrubbing another pot. Can I keep it? Sure. Where should I put it? Somewhere you won't lose it. He'd nod solemnly and tuck it into his pocket, already hunting for the next discovery. Grant came and went like a ghost. He left before dawn and returned after dark, sometimes so exhausted he could barely eat the dinner Evelyn had kept warm for him. They didn't talk much. He'd ask if the children were all right. She'd say yes. He'd nod and retreat to his room, and that would be the extent of their interaction. It should have been fine. It was exactly what they'd agreed to, room and board in exchange for keeping his children alive and his house running. No expectations beyond that. No complications. But sometimes Evelyn would catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not suspicion, exactly. More like he was waiting for something. For her to leave, maybe. For the other shoe to drop. For whatever goodness had walked into his life to reveal itself as temporary. She understood that. She was waiting for the same thing. On the 8th day, Lydia started testing boundaries. It happened during breakfast. Evelyn had made oatmeal, real oatmeal, with milk and a tiny bit of sugar she'd found in a jar at the back of the cupboard. And Noah was eating happily, but Lydia just pushed hers around the bowl. You need to eat, Evelyn said. I'm not hungry. You didn't eat much dinner last night either. I'm fine. Evelyn set down her own spoon. Lydia, what's going on? The girl's jaw set stubbornly. Nothing. Doesn't look like nothing. You're not my mother. You can't tell me what to do. There it was, the real issue, finally surfacing after a week of careful politeness. Noah stopped eating, his eyes going wide. He looked between his sister and Evelyn like he was watching something scary and inevitable unfold. Evelyn took a slow breath. You're right. I'm not your mother. Lydia blinked, like she'd been expecting an argument and didn't know what to do with agreement. But I am the one making the meals, Evelyn continued, and I'm telling you that you need to eat. Not because I'm trying to replace your mama or tell you what to do, because you're skinny as a rail and you need food in your stomach. Maybe I like being skinny. Maybe. Or maybe you've been rationing food for so long you forgot what it feels like to actually be full. Lydia's eyes flashed. You don't know anything about me. I know you spent months keeping yourself and your brother alive on scraps. I know you're exhausted and scared and angry. I know you probably hate that I'm here because it means you failed at something you were never supposed to be doing in the first place. I didn't fail. Boris. Yeah, you did. You failed at being the adult because you're not an adult. You're 8 years old, and the fact that you had to try it all is wrong. And I'm sorry about that. But I'm here now, and that means you get to stop carrying everything alone, which includes eating your damn oatmeal. The profanity slipped out before Evelyn could stop it. She waited for Lydia to look shocked or offended. Instead, something in the girl's face crumpled. I don't know how, she whispered. How to what? How to stop? How to not be the one in charge? How to just be a kid again? Evelyn's throat went tight. She moved around the table and knelt beside Lydia's chair, putting them at eye level the way she had that first night. You practice, she said quietly. You let someone else make breakfast and you eat it. You let your brother play without watching him every second to make sure he's safe. You let yourself laugh at stupid things and cry when you're sad and be angry without having to fix everything. You practice being 8 years old until it starts to feel normal again. What if I can't? Then you keep trying anyway, and I'll be here to remind you. For how long? It was the same question Lydia had asked that first morning. The same question Evelyn had been asking herself every night before falling asleep. I don't know, she said honestly. But I'm here today. That's all I can promise. Lydia searched her face for a long moment. Then slowly, she picked up her spoon and took a bite of oatmeal. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't trust. But it was a start. The next test came from an unexpected direction. Grant's brother showed up on a Sunday afternoon, riding in on a horse that had seen better days and wearing an expression that said he'd come looking for trouble. Evelyn was outside hanging laundry when she heard the hoofbeats. She looked up to see a man who bore enough resemblance to Grant that the relationship was obvious, same dark hair, same build, though he was younger, probably late 20s, and carried himself with the kind of swagger Grant had lost somewhere along the way. He dismounted and tied his horse to the porch rail, looking around the property with undisguised criticism. Help you? Evelyn called. He turned and his eyes went wide when he saw her. Not with attraction, she was used to that absence, but with something closer to shock. Who are you? He asked. Evelyn Mercer. I'm helping out with the house and the children. Helping out? He said it like he was tasting something sour. That what we're calling it? It's what I'm calling it, yes. He walked closer, looking her up and down in a way that made her want to cross her arms over her chest. Grant know you're here? He's the one who asked me to stay. Did he now? The man's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. And how long have you been helping out? Week and a half. Fast work. Evelyn set down the wet shirt she'd been hanging and turned to face him fully. You got something to say. Say it plain. I'm Samuel, Grant's brother. Figured. And I'm wondering what the hell you're doing on my brother's property, living in his house, taking care of his kids when you just happened to show up out of nowhere. I was passing through, heard the children crying, stopped to help, and decided to move in? Decided to stay until the kids weren't starving anymore. Your brother made it clear that was acceptable. Samuel's eyes narrowed. My brother's not thinking straight. Hasn't been since Caroline died. A woman like you shows up, offers to help. He's too desperate to question it. A woman like me. Yeah, convenient timing. Convenient offer. Makes a man wonder what you're really after. Evelyn had heard worse. She'd been called worse. But something about the casual cruelty in Samuel's voice, the easy assumption that she must have ulterior motives because why else would someone like her be here, made anger flare hot in her chest. I'm after a roof over my head and not walking anymore, she said evenly. That's it. Sure it is. You don't believe me, that's fine. But your brother and I have an arrangement that works for both of us. And unless you're planning to move in and take care of these kids yourself, I'd suggest you mind your own business. Samuel's face flushed. Those kids are my business. This ranch is my business. And I'm not going to stand by while some drifter takes advantage of... Sam? They both turned. Grant had emerged from the barn, where he must have been working. His face was unreadable, but there was steel in his voice. Grant. Samuel shifted his weight. Was just having a conversation with your housekeeper here. I heard. Grant walked over to stand beside Evelyn, not quite touching, but close enough that it was clear whose side he was on. And you can leave her alone. I'm looking out for you. I don't need you to look out for me. Someone has to. You can't just take in random strangers. She's not random. She's the reason my kids aren't crying themselves to sleep every night anymore. She's the reason there's food in the house, and the stove stays lit, and Lydia looks like a kid again instead of a ghost. Samuel's jaw worked. And what happens when she leaves? When she gets tired of playing house and moves on? You think the kids will handle that well? The question hung in the air like poison. Grant's face went carefully blank. That's not your concern. The hell it's not. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From someone who's actually helping instead of just showing up to criticize? From getting hurt again? From letting these kids get attached to someone who's going to disappear? You want to hire help, fine. But don't pretend this is... Sam. Grant's voice went dangerously quiet. Get off my property. Samuel stared at his brother. You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. For a long moment, Samuel didn't move. Then he shook his head, walked to his horse, and swung into the saddle. Don't say I didn't warn you, he said, and rode off without looking back. Evelyn stood very still, watching him disappear down the road. Her hands were shaking slightly, though whether from anger or something else she couldn't say. I'm sorry about that, Grant said quietly. He's worried about you, about the kids. I understand that. He's got no right to talk to you that way. He's got every right to question a stranger living in his brother's house. Grant turned to look at her. You believe what he said? That you're taking advantage? No, but I believe he believes it. And the rest? About you leaving? There it was. The question neither of them had wanted to ask directly. Evelyn chose her words carefully. I told you from the start, I don't know how long I'm staying. That hasn't changed. So you might leave. Everyone leaves eventually. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got. Grant studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right. But while you're here, you don't have to take that kind of talk from anyone, including my brother. I've heard worse. That doesn't make it right. Before Evelyn could respond, Noah came barreling out of the house. The ranch cat clutched in his arms. The animal looked deeply offended, but was tolerating the indignity with surprising patience. "Evelyn, look! She let me pick her up." The cat, a scraggly tortoiseshell that had been living semi-feral in the barn, had spent the last week and a half avoiding all human contact. Now she hung limp in Noah's grip, her eyes half closed, looking almost content. "That's quite an achievement," Evelyn said. "She likes me now." "Looks like it. Can I keep her?" "She's not really the keeping type, buddy," Grant said. "She's a barn cat. But she sleeps on my bed now." Grant blinked. "She does?" "Every night. She comes in through the window." "Since when?" Noah shrugged. "Since Evelyn's been here." Grant looked at Evelyn like this was somehow her fault. She held up her hands. "I didn't do anything. Animals either like you or they don't. That cat doesn't like anyone." Apparently she changed her mind. Noah wandered off, still carrying the cat, chattering to her about something important only 4-year-olds understood. The cat's tail swished slowly back and forth, but she made no attempt to escape. "Huh," Grant said. "Huh," Evelyn agreed. They stood there for a moment, watching Noah disappear around the side of the house. Then Grant cleared his throat. "I should get back to work." "All right." He started to walk away, then paused. "Evelyn? Yeah? Thank you. For staying. However long that ends up being." Before she could respond, he was gone, striding back toward the barn with the same purposeful energy he brought to everything. Evelyn returned to the laundry, but her hands were steadier now. Samuel's words still stung. They would for a while. But Grant's defense had meant something, had meant more than she wanted to admit. She was still thinking about it when Lydia appeared beside her. So quietly, Evelyn nearly jumped. "I heard what Uncle Sam said," the girl said. "You shouldn't have been listening." "I was on the porch. He was loud." Evelyn couldn't argue with that. "Forget about it." "Are you going to leave because of what he said?" "No." "Are you going to leave anyway?" Evelyn hung another shirt, buying herself time to think. "Lydia, I can't promise I'll be here forever. I don't know what's going to happen next month or next year, but I'm not leaving today and I'm not leaving tomorrow. Is that enough?" Lydia considered this. "For now." "Then that's what we've got. For now." The girl nodded and went back inside. Through the window, Evelyn could see her picking up the broom, sweeping the kitchen floor with careful, methodical strokes. Practicing, Evelyn thought. Practicing being a kid by doing normal kid chores instead of survival tasks. It was something. The weeks blurred together after that, each one slightly easier than the last. The house stopped fighting her quite so hard. The stove learned to behave. She figured out which floorboards to avoid and which windows were lost causes. The chickens started laying more regularly. Even Rosie the cow seemed slightly less homicidal during milking. Grant worked from dawn to dark, but he started coming home less exhausted. Started staying at the dinner table after eating instead of immediately retreating to his room. Started talking sometimes, short sentences about the fence line that needed mending, or the coyote he'd seen near the north pasture, or the weather turning. Not conversations, exactly, but the building blocks of them. Lydia thawed in increments. She started asking Evelyn to teach her things. How to make bread that actually rose, how to fry eggs without burning them, how to patch clothes so the stitches didn't show as much. She stopped watching Noah every second, trusting that Evelyn would keep him safe. Sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, she even smiled. And Noah bloomed. That was the only word for it. He talked more, laughed more, played more. He followed Evelyn everywhere like a devoted shadow, chattering endlessly about rocks and bugs and the cat and whatever else caught his attention. At night, he started calling for Evie when he needed water or had a bad dream, the nickname appearing without discussion or permission. Evelyn told herself not to get attached, told herself this was temporary, that she was just the help, that she needed to maintain distance for everyone's sake. But it was hard to maintain distance when Noah fell asleep in her lap after dinner. Hard not to care when Lydia came to her with a scraped knee instead of trying to handle it alone. Hard to stay detached when Grant started looking at her like she was something more than just hired help. One evening in late spring, about 6 weeks after she'd arrived, Grant came home early. Not sick early or emergency early, just early. The sun was still up, Dinner was cooking, and the children were playing in the yard while Evelyn worked. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching. When Evelyn finally noticed him, she nearly dropped the pan she was holding. "You're back," she said. "Finish the south fence." He hung his hat on the peg by the door. "Figured I could use a break." "You feeling all right?" "Fine." "Why?" "Because you never finish early." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Maybe I wanted to see what the house looks like with daylight in it." He walked to the window and looked out at where Lydia was teaching Noah how to make a whistle from a piece of grass. The cat sat nearby, watching them with typical feline disdain. "They look happy," he said quietly. "They're good kids." "They weren't, not for a long time." He turned to face her. "I didn't realize how far gone things had gotten until you showed up, and I saw the difference. You were doing your best. My best was nearly killing all of us." Evelyn didn't argue. It was true, and they both knew it. Grant ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned meant he was working up to saying something difficult. "Caroline and I, we had a good marriage," he said finally. "Not perfect. We fought sometimes, but we were partners. We built this place together, and when she died..." He stopped, started again. "When she died, I thought if I just kept working, kept the ranch running, kept moving forward, that would be enough. That I could power through the grief and come out the other side. But you couldn't. No, I just got more tired and more angry and more lost. And the kids..." His voice cracked slightly. "The kids paid the price for that. They're okay now. Because of you. Because you let me help." He shook his head. "You don't get it. I didn't let you help. I was too proud and too stubborn to ask for help from anyone. You just showed up and started doing it anyway, and I was too desperate to tell you no." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying thank you. And I'm saying that having you here has changed things. Not just for the kids. For me too." Something in Evelyn's chest went tight. "Grant, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know we had an agreement, room and board, nothing else, and I'm not trying to change that. I just wanted you to know that you're not just the help. You're part of this household, part of this family, even if we never talked about it that way." Family. The word hit Evelyn harder than it should have. She hadn't had a family since Thomas died, hadn't let herself want one, and now here was Grant offering it to her in his awkward, roundabout way. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "You don't have to say anything. I just..." He stopped, looked out the window again. Samuel was right about one thing. If you leave, it's going to hurt, not just the kids, me too. But I'd rather have you here and risk that hurt than go back to how things were before. What if I can't stay? What if I wake up one morning and the old need to run kicks in and I can't fight it? Then you go. And we figure out how to keep breathing without you." He met her eyes. "But I'm hoping you'll want to stay." Outside, Noah shrieked with laughter as Lydia chased him around the yard. The cat darted between them, joining the game. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. Evelyn looked at Grant's tired, hopeful face. At the house that had slowly transformed from a shell into something that felt like a home. At the children who'd started calling for her instead of just tolerating her presence. "I'm scared," she said quietly. "Of what?" "Of wanting this too much. Of letting myself believe it's real. Of waking up one day and realizing I don't belong here after all." Grant was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You belong here because we need you. Not because you're useful, though you are. Not because you work hard, though you do. Because when you walked into this house that first night, you saw 2 starving kids and you fed them without asking what you'd get in return. That's who you are. That's why you belong." Evelyn's throat went so tight she couldn't speak. "Stay," Grant said. It wasn't a command or a plea, just a simple request, offered without pressure or expectation. "However long you can. Whatever that looks like. Just stay." She wanted to say yes, wanted to promise forever. Wanted to believe that this broken ranch and this grieving family and this man who'd learned to trust her could be enough to make her stop running. But the fear was still there, whispering that nothing good ever lasted for women like her. "I'll try," she said finally. "That's all I can promise." "That's enough." He held her gaze for another moment, then nodded and went to wash up for dinner. Evelyn stood alone in the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she stirred the stew that had been simmering all afternoon. Through the window, she watched Lydia and Noah playing, watched the way they moved with the easy confidence of children who knew they were safe and fed and wanted. Watched the cat tolerate Noah's affection with patient resignation. She'd done that. She'd helped create this small pocket of happiness in a world that didn't offer much of it. Maybe that was enough reason to stay. Maybe it was enough reason to try. Winter came early that year, arriving in October with a vicious cold snap that turned the morning frost into sheets of ice and made every breath visible in the air. Evelyn woke one morning to find the water in the wash basin frozen solid and her fingers so numb she could barely work the buttons on her dress. She fed the stove until it glowed red hot, then wrapped herself in a shawl and went to check on the children. Both were still asleep, buried under every blanket in the house. Noah had somehow migrated to Lydia's bed during the night, and they were curled together like puppies seeking warmth. The cat was wedged between them, her eyes slitted in contentment. Evelyn pulled the door closed quietly and returned to the kitchen to start breakfast. Outside, the wind howled across the plains with a sound like something dying. Grant came in from the barn half an hour later, his face raw and red from the cold. "It's bad out there," he said, stamping snow off his boots. "Temperature's still dropping. This keeps up. We could be snowed in by tonight." "You need to go into town?" Evelyn asked, already knowing the answer. "Should have gone yesterday. We're low on lamp oil, and I need to pick up supplies I ordered at the mercantile. But if I wait much longer, then go now, before it gets worse." He looked torn. "I don't like leaving you and the kids here alone in this weather." "We'll be fine. House is tight, stove works, we've got food. Just get back before dark." "I'll try." He grabbed his coat and hat, then paused at the door. "Keep the fires going. Don't let the children outside. And if something happens, nothing's going to happen. Go." He nodded and disappeared into the white morning. The day passed slowly. Evelyn kept herself busy with indoor chores while the children played quiet games at the table. Lydia was teaching Noah his letters using a primer that had belonged to her mother, her voice patient as she corrected his pronunciation. "See? That's a B. It makes the B sound." "B?" Noah repeated dutifully. "And this one? See? Good, and it makes K." Lydia beamed at him, and something in Evelyn's chest twisted. The girl had started smiling more in recent weeks, started acting like a child instead of a tiny adult carrying the weight of the world, started trusting that the people around her wouldn't disappear. By mid-afternoon, the temperature had dropped so low that Evelyn could see her breath even inside the house. She fed the stove constantly, burning through wood faster than she'd like, but there was no choice. The alternative was freezing. Grant should have been back by now. Evelyn tried not to worry, tried to tell herself he'd just been delayed in town or had decided to wait out the worst of the weather before making the trip home. But the sky was darkening fast, and the wind was picking up, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "When's Pa coming home?" Noah asked, looking up from his letters. "Soon, I hope." "What if he doesn't?" "He will." "But what if—" "Noah," Lydia's voice was sharp. "Stop it." The boy's face crumpled, and Evelyn intervened before the situation could escalate. "Your pa knows this land better than anyone," she said gently. "He'll be careful. He'll come home." Noah nodded, but his eyes stayed worried. Even the cat seemed restless, pacing the room and meowing at intervals like she was asking questions. Darkness fell early, swallowing the world outside the windows. Evelyn lit the lamps and pulled the curtains closed, trying to create the illusion of warmth and safety. She made dinner, bean soup and the last of the bread, and the children ate without complaint, but the empty chair at the table felt enormous. "Tell us a story," Lydia said suddenly. Evelyn looked up from her bowl. "What kind of story?" "Any kind. Mama used to tell us stories before bed." It was the first time Lydia had volunteered information about her mother without being asked. Evelyn set down her spoon carefully. "I'm not much of a storyteller." "Please?" Noah joined in, his small voice hopeful. "Please, Evie?" So Evelyn told them about growing up on a farm much like this one, about the horse that had given her the scar on her face, about the time she and her brother had tried to catch a wild turkey for Thanksgiving and ended up covered in mud and feathers. She made it funny, exaggerating the ridiculous parts, and the children laughed in all the right places. When the story ended, Noah yawned hugely. Another one? Bedtime, Evelyn said firmly. You can barely keep your eyes open. She tucked them into bed with extra blankets, checking the window to make sure it was sealed tight against the cold. The cat jumped up and settled between them, purring loudly. Evie? Noah's voice was small in the darkness. Yeah, buddy? What if Pa's lost? He's not lost. But what if he is? What if he can't find his way home in the snow? Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed. Your pa's been ranching this land for years. He knows every inch of it. The snow might slow him down, but it won't stop him from getting home to you. You promise? She shouldn't promise things she couldn't control. Shouldn't make guarantees about a man's safety in a winter storm on the frontier where people died from exposure all the time. I promise he's doing everything he can to get back to you, she said instead. And I promise I'm not going anywhere. No matter what happens, you're not alone. Noah seemed satisfied with this. He closed his eyes and was asleep within minutes, his breathing evening out into the soft rhythm of childhood. Lydia stayed awake longer, staring at the ceiling. I remember when Mama died, she said quietly. How Pa tried to pretend everything was fine, even though it wasn't. How he kept saying we'd be okay, but he looked so scared all the time. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that, so she just listened. I don't want to lose him too, Lydia whispered. You won't. You can't know that. No, but I can be here while we wait for him. Is that enough? Lydia turned her head to look at Evelyn, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. Are you scared? Evelyn considered lying, then decided these children had seen enough pretense. A little, but mostly I'm cold and annoyed that your pa picked today of all days to go to town. A small smile crossed Lydia's face. He does have bad timing. Terrible timing. Evie? Yeah? I'm glad you're here. The words were simple, but they hit Evelyn like a punch to the chest. She reached out and squeezed Lydia's hand. Me too, honey. Now get some sleep. She left the door cracked and returned to the main room where the fire was burning low. She fed it more wood, then wrapped herself in a blanket and settled into the chair by the window to watch for any sign of movement in the darkness outside. The hours crawled past. 10 o'clock. 11. Midnight. No Grant. Evelyn's worry sharpened into something close to fear. The temperature outside had to be well below freezing. If Grant had gotten caught in the storm, if his horse had thrown him, if he'd gotten turned around in the whiteout conditions, she forced herself to stop. Panic wouldn't help anyone. At midnight, she finally saw movement through the window. A dark shape emerging from the swirling snow, moving slowly but steadily toward the house. Evelyn was at the door before she consciously decided to move, pulling it open to reveal Grant leading his horse through the storm. Both man and animal were covered in snow, their movements stiff and exhausted. Get inside, she said. Horse needs... I'll handle the horse. Get inside before you freeze to death. For once, Grant didn't argue. He stumbled into the house while Evelyn grabbed the horse's reins and led it to the barn. The animal was shivering violently, its breath coming in great steaming clouds. She rubbed it down with a blanket, gave it feed and water, then ran back to the house through wind that tried to knock her sideways. Grant was sitting at the table, still in his wet coat, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. His lips had a bluish tinge, and he was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. Off, Evelyn ordered, tugging at his coat. All of it. Now. I'm fine. You're hypothermic. Off now. She pulled the coat off his shoulders, then went to work on his boots. They were frozen solid, and it took her several minutes to get them unlaced. His socks were wet through. His pants were stiff with ice. Can you stand? She asked. He nodded and pushed himself upright, swaying slightly. Evelyn guided him to the stove, then went to the bedroom to grab dry clothes and more blankets. The children were still sleeping, Noah's small body tucked against his sister's side. She pulled the door closed quietly and returned to find Grant trying to unbutton his shirt with fingers that wouldn't cooperate. Let me, she said. She unbuttoned the shirt with efficient movements, trying not to think about the intimacy of the gesture, trying to focus on the practical necessity of getting him warm. His skin was ice cold to the touch, and when she pressed her palm to his chest, his heart was beating too fast. She wrapped him in blankets, then made him sit by the stove while she heated more water for coffee. What happened? She asked. Got delayed in town. His voice was hoarse. Storm came in faster than expected. Should have stayed, but I knew you'd worry. So you rode home in a blizzard? Couldn't leave you here alone with the kids. Grant, you could have died. But I didn't. He looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. I had to get home. Had to make sure you were all safe. Evelyn wanted to yell at him for being reckless. Wanted to point out that his children needed him alive more than they needed him home tonight. But looking at his face, at the raw fear that was only now starting to fade, she understood. He hadn't been trying to be a hero. He'd been trying to outrun the terror of losing more people he cared about. You're an idiot, she said quietly. I know. The kids were fine. We had food, heat, everything we needed. I know. You risked your life for nothing. I risked my life because the thought of you and the kids here alone, not knowing if I was coming back, not knowing if something had happened. He stopped, swallowed hard. I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the person who doesn't come home. The weight of what he wasn't saying settled between them. He'd already lost Caroline, already knew what it felt like to be the one left behind. He couldn't bear to be the one who left, even accidentally. Evelyn poured him more coffee, then sat down across from him. You're still an idiot. Noted. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm rage outside. Slowly, Grant's shivering subsided. Color returned to his face, his breathing evened out. Thank you, he said finally, for taking care of the horse, for getting me inside, for not letting me freeze to death out of pure stubbornness. Someone has to keep you alive. Seems like that's becoming your full-time job. Someone's got to do it. He almost smiled at that. Then his expression turned serious. Evelyn, I need to tell you something. What? When I was out there, in the storm, not sure if I was going the right direction, I kept thinking about you and the kids, about getting back. And I realized... He stopped, started again. You're not just the help anymore. You haven't been for a while. Evelyn's heart started beating faster. Grant, I know we had an agreement. Room and board, nothing else. And if that's still all you want, that's fine. But I need you to know that you're more than that to me, more than that to this family. Don't, she said quietly. Don't what? Don't say things you might regret when you're warmer and thinking clearer. I'm thinking plenty clear. You nearly died tonight. You're exhausted and cold and probably still half frozen. This isn't the time. When is the time? His voice was rough. When I'm lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying not to think about how empty this house feels when you're not in it. When I'm working in the fields and catch myself hurrying home because I know you'll be there. When I watch you with my kids and realize they love you just as much as I. He stopped abruptly, like he'd said more than he meant to. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. You don't love me, Evelyn said finally. You love that I take care of your children and keep your house running. You love the idea of not being alone anymore. But you don't love me. You're wrong. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm convenient, I'm useful. I showed up when you needed someone, and I've made your life easier, and now you're confusing gratitude with the... Stop! Grant leaned forward, his eyes intense. You think I'm confused? You think I don't know the difference between needing help and needing you? I think you're lonely and grieving and desperate for things to be normal again, and I happen to be here filling the space your wife left. But I'm not Caroline. I'll never be Caroline. I know that. I'm not asking you to be. Then what are you asking? Grant ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. I don't know. I'm not good at this. I don't know how to tell you that when I think about the future, you're in it. That when I come home at night, the best part is seeing you in the kitchen, or sitting with the kids, or just existing in my house like you belong there. That I want you to stay, not because you're useful, but because losing you would... He stopped, shook his head. Would what? Evelyn pressed. Would break something I didn't know could still break. The words hung in the air between them. Raw. Honest. Terrifying. Evelyn stood up abruptly, moving to the window to stare out at the storm. Her hands were shaking. You can't say things like that to me, she said. Why not? Because I'll start believing them. And when you realize you made a mistake, when you figure out that wanting me to stay and actually wanting me are two different things, it's going to hurt too much. What if I'm not wrong? What if I know exactly what I want? Then you're not thinking clearly. Look at me, Grant. She turned to face him. Really look at me. I'm not young. I'm not pretty. I'm not the kind of woman men like you want for anything except keeping house and raising kids. And the minute you remember that, stop. Grant stood up, letting the blankets fall away, and crossed the room to stand in front of her. Just stop. It's true. It's not. And I'm tired of hearing you talk about yourself like you're only worth what you can do for other people. His voice was fierce. You're strong. You're capable. You're kind in ways that actually matter. You make my kids laugh. You turn this house back into a home. You take care of everyone around you without asking for anything in return. And yeah, you're also stubborn and sharp-tongued, and you don't take any of my nonsense, and I— He stopped, took a breath. You what? Evelyn whispered. I care about you. More than I should. More than is smart. And I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt. But I'm asking you to stay anyway, not as the help, not as a temporary solution, as someone who belongs here. With us. With me. Evelyn's throat was so tight she could barely breathe. You're asking me to take a chance on something that'll probably fall apart. I'm asking you to take a chance on something that might not. Isn't that worth the risk? She wanted to say yes, wanted to lean into the warmth and safety and belonging he was offering. But the fear was still there, whispering all the old familiar lies. That she didn't deserve this. That it wouldn't last. That eventually he'd realize his mistake and she'd be left with nothing but the memory of what it felt like to almost have something real. I don't know if I can, she admitted. Grant's face fell, but he nodded. Okay. I'm not saying no. I'm saying I need time to think, to figure out if I can trust this, trust you, trust myself. How much time? I don't know. He looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to push, wanted to make her promise something right now in this moment, but instead he just nodded again. All right. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. They stood there for a long moment, close enough to touch, but not touching, the storm raging outside while something equally turbulent churned between them. Finally, Grant stepped back. I should get some sleep. Long day tomorrow. Yeah. He gathered up his wet clothes and headed toward his room, then paused at the door. Evelyn? Yeah? Thank you, for tonight, for everything. Then he was gone, and Evelyn was alone with the dying fire and her racing thoughts. She sat back down in the chair by the window and pulled the blanket tight around her shoulders. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white. Grant cared about her, maybe even loved her, though he hadn't quite said the word. He wanted her to stay. Wanted her to be part of this family for real, not just as hired help. Everything she'd stopped letting herself want was being offered to her on a silver platter, and she was too terrified to take it. The next morning dawned clear and brutally cold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed into a frozen landscape that glittered in the early sunlight. Evelyn woke to find she'd fallen asleep in the chair, her neck stiff and her body aching from the awkward position. The fire had burned down to embers. The house was freezing again. She fed the stove and got it roaring, then started breakfast. Grant emerged from his room looking tired but healthy, none the worse for his brush with hypothermia. He nodded at her and she nodded back, and neither of them mentioned the conversation from the night before. The children woke up happy to find their father home safe, and breakfast was chaotic with Noah chattering about the snow and Lydia asking if they could go outside to play. Grant said yes, and Evelyn bundled them into every warm thing they owned before sending them out to explore the winter wonderland. She and Grant worked in careful parallel all morning, him handling outside chores, her managing inside ones, barely speaking except when necessary. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt like both of them were holding their breath, waiting for something to shift. The shift came that afternoon when Evelyn started feeling wrong. It started as fatigue, which she dismissed as lack of sleep. Then came the headache, sharp and insistent behind her eyes. Then the chills that no amount of standing by the stove could fix. By evening, she was burning with fever. Grant found her slumped at the kitchen table, unable to stand without the room spinning. Evelyn? His voice came from far away. Hey, look at me. She tried to focus on his face, but it kept blurring. I'm fine, she managed. Just tired. You're burning up. His hand on her forehead was blessedly cool. When did this start? Don't know. Afternoon, maybe? Why didn't you say something? Dinner needed... She stopped as a wave of nausea rolled through her. The children need to eat. I'll handle dinner. You need to lie down. She tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Grant caught her, his arms strong and steady as he half carried her to her room. He settled her on the bed and pulled the blankets up. I'll get water, he said. Don't move. As if she could. The next few days passed in a blur of fever dreams and darkness. Evelyn was aware of Grant bringing her water, changing the cloths on her forehead, helping her sip broth when her stomach could handle it. She was aware of Lydia standing in the doorway looking scared. She was aware of Noah's small voice asking when Evie would be better. But mostly, she was aware of the fire in her blood and the way her body shook with chills even under a mountain of blankets. On the third night, she woke to find Grant asleep in the chair beside her bed, his head pillowed on his arms on the mattress. He looked exhausted, his face drawn and pale in the lamplight. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. Instead, she reached out with a shaking hand and touched his hair. He woke instantly, his head snapping up. "Evelyn, you with me?" "Water?" she croaked. He held the cup to her lips, supporting her head while she drank. The water was cool and perfect, and she drained the entire cup. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like death." "Better than yesterday, then. Yesterday you looked like death." She almost smiled. "The children are fine. Lydia's been helping. We're managing." "You shouldn't be in here. You'll get sick." "Don't care." "Grant? I'm not leaving you alone in here to burn up with fever while I sleep safely in my room. Not happening." Evelyn wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Instead, she closed her eyes and let herself drift, secure in the knowledge that Grant was there, that she wasn't alone. She woke again sometime later to voices outside her room, low, urgent. "Can't keep doing this, Pa. You haven't slept properly in 3 days." Lydia, sounding more adult than any 8-year-old should. "I'm fine," Grant said. "You're not. You're going to make yourself sick, and then who's going to take care of Noah and me?" "Lydia, I can watch her. I can change the cloths and make sure she drinks water. You need to sleep." A long pause. Then, "You sure?" "I'm sure. Go to bed. I'll wake you if anything changes." Footsteps retreated. Then the door opened, and Lydia slipped into the room. She changed the cloth on Evelyn's forehead with careful, practiced movements, then settled into the chair Grant had vacated. "You're supposed to be sleeping," Evelyn whispered. Lydia jumped slightly. "You're awake. Hard to sleep with you two having a full conversation outside my door." "Sorry." "Don't be." Evelyn tried to sit up and failed. "You shouldn't be in here. The fever might be catching." "I don't care." "Lydia, when Mama was sick, Pa made me stay away. Said he didn't want me to catch it, didn't want me to see her like that. But I heard her anyway, heard her crying, heard her asking for me, and then she died. And I never got to say goodbye." Lydia's voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. "I'm not staying away this time. I'm not losing someone else without at least being there." Evelyn's heart broke a little. "I'm not your mama." "I know, but you're—" Lydia stopped, swallowed hard. "You're important, and I need you to get better, so I'm staying right here until you do." "Bossy," Evelyn murmured. "I learned from the best." Despite everything, Evelyn smiled. Then the fever pulled her back under, and the world went dark again. She dreamed of Thomas, of the farm they'd shared, of the plans they'd made for a future that never came. But when she reached for him in the dream, his face shifted and changed, becoming Grant's face, Grant's eyes, Grant's voice telling her to stay. When she woke again, weak but clear-headed, the fever had finally broken. Recovery came slowly, measured in small victories that felt enormous. Sitting up without the room spinning, keeping down broth, then solid food, walking from the bed to the chair without Grant's arm around her waist. It took nearly 2 weeks before Evelyn felt strong enough to leave her room for more than a few minutes at a time. When she finally emerged fully dressed and steady on her feet, she found the house running with surprising efficiency. The dishes were clean, the floors were swept. Bread was rising on the counter. Lydia stood at the stove, stirring something in a pot with careful concentration. She looked up when Evelyn entered, and her face split into a genuine smile. "You're up," she said. "I'm up." Evelyn lowered herself into a chair, still not quite trusting her legs. "Who's been teaching you to cook?" "Pa." "And I remembered some of what you showed me. Lydia turned back to the pot. It's not as good as when you make it, but we haven't starved. I can see that. Noah came barreling in from outside, the cat at his heels, and stopped dead when he saw Evelyn. His eyes went wide. Evie! He launched himself at her, and she barely had time to brace before he crashed into her lap. You're better. I'm better, she confirmed, wrapping her arms around his small body. He was heavier than she remembered, solid and warm and very much alive. Were you good while I was sick? Mostly. What does mostly mean? Lydia snorted. It means he tried to bring the cat into bed with him every night and cried when Pa said no. The cat wanted to sleep with me, Noah said defensively. She told me so. The cat can't talk. Can too. You just don't listen right. Evelyn listened to them bicker with something approaching joy. She'd missed this, missed them, missed being part of the daily chaos of this household instead of trapped in a bed fighting fever dreams. Grant came in from the barn an hour later and stopped in the doorway when he saw her at the table. Something crossed his face. Relief, maybe, or something deeper. You're up, he said, echoing his daughter. Seems to be the general consensus. He hung his hat and coat, then crossed to the stove to pour himself coffee. His movements were careful, controlled, like he was holding himself back from something. How do you feel? He asked. Weak, tired, but better. Good. That's good. The conversation felt stilted, formal, like they'd both forgotten how to talk to each other after those fevered nights when he'd sat beside her bed and she'd been too sick to maintain any kind of walls. Lydia looked between them, then grabbed Noah's hand. Come on, let's go check on the chickens. But I want to stay with Evie. Now, Noah? The children disappeared outside, and suddenly Evelyn and Grant were alone in the kitchen with too much silence between them. Grant sat down across from her, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. I wasn't sure you were going to make it, he said quietly. The second night, when the fever spiked, I thought... He stopped, shook his head. Doesn't matter, you're okay now. Thanks to you. Lydia said you barely slept. Couldn't, not when you were... He stopped again, tried a different approach. When Caroline was sick, I let the doctor handle everything. Stayed away like I was supposed to. Let other people take care of her while I kept working, kept the ranch going, kept pretending everything would be fine. And then she died, and I realized I'd wasted the last weeks of her life hiding from what was happening. Grant! I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Wasn't going to let you fight alone while I stayed safely distant. Evelyn's chest felt tight. I'm not Caroline. I know, but you're... He met her eyes. You matter. To me. To the kids. And I needed you to know someone was there. That you weren't alone. I wasn't. You made sure of that. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Grant cleared his throat. While you were sick, I did a lot of thinking. About what I said before the fever hit. About asking you to stay. Evelyn's heart started beating faster. And I meant it. Every word. But I also realized I was asking you to make a decision about your whole life while giving you nothing in return except my word that things would work out. He set down his coffee cup. That's not fair to you. What are you saying? I'm saying if you want to leave, I understand. If you want to stay but need more time before deciding anything permanent, that's fine too. If you want to stay as the help and nothing more, I'll respect that. Whatever you need, Evelyn, I'm not going to pressure you into something you're not ready for. It was the right thing to say. The generous, understanding, perfectly reasonable thing to say. And it made Evelyn want to scream. What if I don't know what I need? She asked. Then we'll figure it out as we go. What if I'm scared of wanting this too much? Then I'll remind you every day that you're allowed to want things. What if I leave anyway? What if one morning I wake up and the fear is stronger than everything else and I just go? Grant's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. Then I'll let you go. I won't chase you, won't guilt you, won't make the kids write you letters begging you to come back. You'll be free to leave whenever you want. Just like that? Just like that. Evelyn stared at him. You'd really let me walk away? I'd hate it. It would hurt like hell. But yes, I'd let you go. He leaned forward. Because keeping you here against your will, making you stay out of obligation or guilt, that's not what I want. I want you to choose this. Choose us. Choose me. And that means you have to be free to choose something else. The words settled between them, heavy with meaning. "You're making it very hard to keep my walls up," Evelyn said quietly. "Good. Your walls are exhausting. They keep me safe." "From what? From being happy? From belonging somewhere? From getting hurt when it all falls apart? What if it doesn't fall apart?" "Everything falls apart eventually." "Not everything." Grant reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was rough and warm against hers. "Some things last. Some things are worth fighting for, even when you're scared. And I think this family, this life we're building, is one of those things." Evelyn looked down at their joined hands. She should pull away, should maintain distance, should protect herself the way she'd learned to protect herself over the past 3 years. Instead, she held on. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Do what?" "Trust that this is real, that you mean what you're saying, that I'm not just convenient." "Then let me prove it to you." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Stay. Give me time to show you that this isn't about convenience or gratitude or filling a gap Caroline left. Let me prove that I want you here because you're you, not because you're useful." "How long?" "However long it takes." Evelyn wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself hope that this broken man and his grieving children and this falling apart ranch could be hers, that she could build something here that would last. But the fear was still there, whispering its familiar poison. "I need to think," she said. Grant nodded and released her hand. "Take all the time you need." Spring came gradually, melting the snow into mud and coaxing the first green shoots out of the frozen ground. Evelyn regained her strength slowly, taking on more and more of the household tasks until she was back to her normal routine. But something had shifted between her and Grant, something subtle but unmistakable. He touched her more now, a hand on her shoulder when he passed behind her chair, his fingers brushing hers when he handed her something, his palm on the small of her back when he guided her through a doorway. Nothing inappropriate, nothing the children would question, just small gestures that said, "I see you, I want you, I'm here." And Evelyn, despite her best efforts, found herself responding, leaning into his touch, finding excuses to stand close to him, letting herself imagine what it would be like to stop fighting the pull between them. The children noticed the change too. Noah started calling Grant Pa and Evelyn Evie in the same breath, like they were a unit. Lydia watched them with knowing eyes, not saying anything but clearly seeing everything. It should have been perfect, should have been the slow, natural progression towards something real and lasting. Then Grant announced they needed to go into town for supplies, and everything got complicated. "I don't need to go," Evelyn said when he mentioned the trip. "You can handle it." "I want you to come." "Why?" "Because you've been cooped up on this ranch for months. Because you might see something you need that I wouldn't think to buy. Because..." He stopped. Tried again. "Because I want people to see us together." There it was, the real reason. "Grant, I know I'm pushing, but Evelyn, you can't hide on this ranch forever. Eventually you have to come to town, and people are going to talk either way. Might as well give them something accurate to talk about." "You mean give them confirmation that the lonely widow is living in sin with the grieving widower?" His face hardened. "Is that really what you think this is?" "It's what they'll think." "I don't care what they think." "Easy for you to say. You're a man, a rancher. People respect you. I'm just what? Just me, large and plain and convenient." Grant crossed the room in 2 strides and gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Stop. Stop talking about yourself like that. You are not just convenient. You are not just anything. You're smart and strong, and you've kept this family alive, and anyone who can't see that is blind and stupid. The people in town can go to hell. I don't care what they think, and neither should you." "But I do care," Evelyn said, "because when they look at us together, when they see you with me, they're going to wonder what's wrong with you, that you'd settle for someone like me. And eventually, you're going to start wondering the same thing." Grant's hands tightened on her shoulders. "That's never going to happen. You can't know that." "I can, because I've spent months watching you be amazing, and the only thing I wonder is what I did to deserve you walking into my life." Evelyn's eyes stung. "You're just saying that..." "I'm saying it because it's true, and I'll keep saying it until you believe me." He gentled his grip. Come to town with me. Let people talk. Let them see that we don't care what they think. Show them that you belong here. She wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, but looking at Grant's face, at the determination and certainty there, something in her resistance crumbled. Fine, she said. I'll go. His face lit up. Yeah? Yeah, but if people are horrible, I'm leaving and you're not stopping me. Deal. Town was exactly as Evelyn remembered it. Dusty, small, full of people who had opinions about everything and everyone. They drove the wagon in on a Saturday morning, the children bouncing with excitement in the back. Noah hadn't been to town in months, and Lydia kept pointing out buildings and landmarks like she was giving a tour. Grant parked in front of the mercantile, then came around to help Evelyn down from the wagon. His hand stayed on her waist a moment longer than necessary, and she saw the exact moment when Mrs. Patterson across the street noticed. The woman's eyes went wide. Then her mouth pursed into a disapproving line, and she turned to whisper to her companion. It had begun. Inside the mercantile, Mr. Dawson greeted Grant warmly. Then his eyes landed on Evelyn, and his smile became slightly strained. Mrs. Mercer, didn't expect to see you. Mr. Dawson, Evelyn kept her voice neutral. We need supplies. Of course. Grant, you have that list? While Grant and Mr. Dawson discussed flour and nails and lamp oil, Evelyn wandered the store with the children. Lydia wanted fabric for a new dress. Noah wanted candy. Evelyn found herself drawn to a bolt of blue calico that would make nice curtains for the kitchen. She was running her hand over the fabric when she heard the voices behind her. Shameful is what it is. Living there for months now, I heard. And him with 2 young children in the house. Someone should say something. Evelyn's hand stilled on the fabric. She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge that she'd heard, just stood very still while the women's voices continued their poison. I mean, look at her. What could Grant possibly... Convenience, obviously. She keeps house and he doesn't have to pay her. I heard she showed up out of nowhere, just appeared one day and moved right in. Probably saw a grieving widower and decided he'd be easy prey. Evelyn's vision went white at the edges. Her hands clenched into fists. Excuse me? The women turned and Evelyn saw their faces go pale as they realized she'd been standing right there the whole time. Did you need something? Evelyn asked, her voice deadly calm. We were just spreading vicious gossip about people you don't know and situations you don't understand. Now see here, No, you see here. Evelyn stepped closer. Grant Hale is a good man trying to raise his children alone after losing his wife. I showed up and helped because his kids were starving and his house was falling apart and he was working himself to death trying to be enough for everyone. I didn't seduce him. I didn't trap him. I didn't take advantage. I just fed his children and kept them warm and let them be kids again. If that offends your delicate sensibilities, that's your problem, not mine. The women stared at her, mouths slightly open. And for the record, Evelyn continued, Grant Hale could have his pick of any woman in this town. The fact that he chooses to spend time with me says more about his character than mine. So maybe instead of standing around judging people whose boots you've never walked in, you could mind your own damn business. She turned and walked away before they could respond, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. Grant was waiting by the counter, and one look at her face told him something had happened. What's wrong? Nothing. We done here? Almost. Evelyn, I want to leave. Did someone say something to you? It doesn't matter. The hell it doesn't. Grant's voice had gone dangerous. Who was it? Grant, leave it. But he'd already spotted the 2 women huddled near the fabric, looking guilty and afraid. His face went hard. Wait here, he said, and strode toward them. Evelyn watched as Grant spoke to the women in a low, intense voice. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but she saw their faces go from defensive to mortified, saw them try to interrupt and get cut off immediately, saw them finally nod and scurry out of the store like scolded children. When Grant returned, his jaw was clenched tight. What did you say to them? Evelyn asked. That if they had a problem with you living on my ranch, they could take it up with me directly instead of spreading poison. And that if I heard one more word of gossip about you from anyone in this town, they'd find their credit cut off at this store and every other business I have connections with. You can't. I can. And I did. He looked at her, his eyes fierce. I meant what I said, Evelyn. I don't care what they think, and I'm not going to stand by while people treat you like you're less than you are. Mr. Dawson cleared his throat. Your supplies are ready, Grant. I'll help you load them. The ride home was quiet. The children fell asleep in the back of the wagon, lulled by the movement and the warm sun. Evelyn sat beside Grant, staring at the road ahead. I'm sorry, he said finally. For what? For pushing you to come to town. For subjecting you to that. You didn't make those women say those things. No, but I knew it was a possibility, and I asked you to come anyway. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. You really threatened to cut off their credit? Yes. That was reckless. That was necessary. Grant, no. He pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. Listen to me. I know you're used to taking that kind of talk. I know you've probably heard worse, but you don't have to accept it anymore. Not while I'm here. Not while you're part of my family. I'm not part of your family. You are. The kids think so. I think so. The only person who doesn't seem to think so is you. Evelyn's throat went tight. Because I'm scared. I know. Because everyone keeps saying I'm temporary, and part of me believes them. I know. Because if I let myself believe this is real, and it turns out not to be. It's real, Grant interrupted. Evelyn, this is real. What I feel for you is real. What the kids feel for you is real. The life we're building together is real. And I need you to stop waiting for it to fall apart and just let yourself have it. What if I can't? Then I'll wait until you can. He reached over and took her hand. But I'm not giving up on this. On us. Even if you don't believe in it yet. Evelyn looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, at the certainty and determination there, at the man who defended her without hesitation, who'd chosen her over the approval of his entire town, who kept showing up day after day proving that she mattered. I'm still scared, she whispered. That's okay. Be scared. But stay anyway. And looking at him, at the hope and fear warring in his eyes, Evelyn realized he was scared too. Scared she'd leave. Scared he wasn't enough to make her stay. Scared of losing another person he'd started to love. They were both terrified. Both damaged. Both certain this was going to end badly. But maybe that was okay. Maybe love wasn't about certainty. Maybe it was about choosing to stay despite the fear. Okay, she said. Grant blinked. Okay. Okay, I'll stay. Not because I'm not scared, not because I'm certain this will work, but because I want to try. The smile that spread across Grant's face was like the sun coming out. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and she let herself lean into his warmth. Thank you, he murmured into her hair. Don't thank me yet. I'm probably going to panic and try to leave at least 3 more times. I'll talk you out of it. What if you can't? Then I'll let you go and hope you come back. They sat there in the stopped wagon, holding each other while the horses waited patiently and the children slept, and the sun warmed the spring air. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't certain, it was messy and complicated and probably going to be harder than either of them anticipated. But it was real. And maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Evelyn found Grant sitting on the porch, staring out at the darkness. Can't sleep? She asked, settling into the chair beside him. Too much thinking. About? About how close I came to losing you. To the fever, to your fear, to my own stupidity. You're not stupid. I asked you to stay without giving you any reason to trust that I meant it. That was pretty stupid. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. You know what scared me most about being sick? What? That I'd die and you'd all be okay. That you'd bury me and move on and I'd just be a footnote in the story of this family. The woman who helped for a while and then disappeared. Grant turned to look at her. That's not what you are to us. I know that now. But at the time, lying there in the fever, I was so afraid that I didn't actually matter, that I was just filling space until something better came along. There is nothing better, there's just you. The simple certainty in his voice made her chest ache. Grant, I need to tell you something. What? When Thomas died, I thought my life was over. I thought the only good thing I'd ever have was gone. And all that was left was surviving until I could join him. I stopped wanting things, stopped hoping, just moved from place to place, working where I could, never staying long enough to care or be cared about. And now? Now I'm terrified because I want things again. I want to wake up in this house every morning. I want to watch Lydia grow up and teach Noah to read and sit on this porch with you every night. I want this life so much it scares me. Grant reached over and took her hand. Then take it. It's yours. We're yours. However imperfect and messy and uncertain it all is. Evelyn looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. There's something else. What? Earlier in town, when you defended me like that, when you threatened those women and didn't care what it cost you. She stopped, took a breath. That's when I realized I'm in love with you. The words hung in the air between them. Grant's grip on her hand tightened. Say that again. I'm in love with you. Probably have been for a while. I just didn't want to admit it because admitting it makes it real, and real things can hurt you. Evelyn? I'm still scared. I'm probably always going to be a little scared. But I'm done running. I'm done protecting myself from getting hurt by refusing to let myself have anything good. So yes, I'll stay. Not just for a while, for as long as you'll have me. Grant pulled her out of her chair and into his lap, his arms wrapping around her like he was afraid she'd disappear. I love you too, he said roughly. Have for weeks now, maybe longer. I just didn't know how to tell you without scaring you off. I was already scared. I know, but you stayed anyway. He pulled back to look at her. You're the bravest person I know. I'm really not. You are. Brave enough to stop at a crying child's house when you could have kept walking. Brave enough to stay when you wanted to run. Brave enough to love again after losing someone. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. What do we do now? Now we figure it out as we go, together. Just like that? Just like that. She leaned her forehead against his, breathing him in. The kids are going to have opinions about this. The kids already have opinions about this. Noah asked me last week when you were going to officially be his mother. What did you tell him? That we had to ask you first. Evelyn pulled back to look at him. Are you asking? Not tonight. Tonight I'm just holding you and being grateful you're here. The asking can wait until we're both ready. What if I'm never ready? Then we'll figure out something else. But Evelyn, I want you to know that when I do ask, it won't be because I need a mother for my children or help with the ranch. It'll be because I love you and I want to spend whatever life I have left making you happy. That's a lot of pressure. You can handle it. She almost laughed. You have too much faith in me. I have exactly the right amount of faith in you. They sat there together on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms while the night settled around them. Inside, the children slept. The cat probably curled between them. The house creaked and settled. Everything was imperfect and uncertain and absolutely real. And for the first time since Thomas died, Evelyn let herself believe that maybe she deserved this. Deserved love and family and belonging. Deserved a second chance at happiness, even though the first one had ended in loss. Deserved to stop running and finally come home. The days after that conversation on the porch should have been perfect. Should have been the easy slide into happiness that came after finally admitting the truth. Instead, Evelyn woke up 3 mornings later with her heart pounding and her bags half packed before she even realized what she was doing. The urge to run had come out of nowhere, slamming into her like a physical force. 1 minute she'd been making breakfast, the next she was in her room shoving clothes into her travel bag with shaking hands, her mind spinning with all the reasons why staying was a mistake. She was too damaged, too scared, too much of everything wrong and not enough of anything right. Grant would realize it eventually. The children would get hurt. She'd ruin everything just by being there. Better to leave now before it got worse, before the inevitable collapse, before... What are you doing? Evelyn spun around to find Lydia standing in the doorway, her face very pale, her eyes locked on the half-packed bag. I'm just... Evelyn's voice caught. I'm organizing. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. Lydia's voice was flat, empty. The same voice she'd used that first night when she'd said her mother was dead. No, I'm just... Shh. Don't lie to me. Lydia stepped into the room. I'm not stupid. I know what packing looks like. Evelyn's hands stilled on the bag. Her throat felt like it was closing. Lydia, I'm sorry. Why? The girl's voice cracked. Why are you leaving? Did we do something wrong? Did I do something? No, no, honey, you didn't do anything wrong. None of you did. Then why? It was the same question Evelyn had been asking herself for the past 20 minutes. Why was she doing this? Why was she throwing away everything she'd just admitted she wanted? Because wanting things scared her more than losing them ever could. I don't know, she whispered. Lydia stood very still for a long moment. Then, without saying another word, she turned and left the room. Evelyn heard her footsteps retreat down the hall, heard a door open and close, heard the low murmur of voices. She sank onto the bed, staring at the half-packed bag. What was she doing? What was wrong with her that she couldn't just accept happiness when it was offered? 5 minutes later, Lydia returned. This time she had Noah with her. The little boy's eyes were red, his face streaked with tears. He looked at Evelyn, then at the bag, then back at Evelyn with an expression of such complete betrayal that it physically hurt to see. Evie? His voice was so small. Are you leaving? I don't... Evelyn stopped. Tried again. I'm confused, buddy. I'm scared and I don't know what to do. Do you not love us anymore? The question hit like a fist to the chest. Of course I love you. I love you so much. Then why are you packing? Because I'm scared that if I stay, I'll mess everything up. That I'll hurt you somehow. Noah walked over to the bed and climbed up beside her. He was getting bigger, she realized, taller, heavier. Not the tiny, starving 4-year-old she'd found that first night. You won't hurt us, he said, with the absolute certainty of a child who hadn't learned yet that good people could cause pain. You're good. You make Pa smile. You teach Lydia cooking. You let the cat sleep on my bed. He searched for the right word. You're ours. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Noah. When Mama died, everyone said she went to a better place. But I don't think there is a better place. I think she just went away and we got left behind. His small hand found hers. If you leave, it'll be like that again. Like someone we love just decided we weren't good enough to stay for. That's not... Evelyn's voice broke. That's not why I'd be leaving. You're more than good enough. You're perfect. I'm the one who's not... Stop! Lydia's voice cut across the room like a whip. Just stop saying that about yourself. Evelyn looked up to find the girl standing with her arms crossed, her face set in an expression that looked eerily like Grant's when he was angry. You've been here for months, Lydia continued. Months of taking care of us, feeding us, teaching me things, making Noah laugh, making Pa look alive again. And the whole time you've been waiting for us to realize you're not good enough. Like we're all just too stupid to see what you think is so obvious about yourself. That's not It is, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of watching you be amazing and then talk about yourself like you're worthless. I'm tired of seeing Pa look at you like you hung the moon and you act like he must be confused or lying. I'm tired of you getting ready to run every time something good happens. Evelyn flinched. I'm sorry. I don't want you to be sorry. I want you to stay. For real. Not just until you get scared again. Not just until you convince yourself we'd be better off without you. I want you to stay because you actually want to be here. I do want to be here. Then prove it. Lydia's voice wavered slightly, the first crack in her armor. Unpack the bag, come have breakfast. Stop waiting for everything to fall apart and just be here with us, please. The word hung in the air. Please. The same word Lydia had said that first night when she'd finally admitted she couldn't do everything alone. The same desperate, honest plea from a child who'd already lost too much. Evelyn looked at Noah's tear-stained face, at Lydia's fierce, frightened expression, at the bag sitting open on the bed, half full of clothes she'd packed in a panic. She'd told Grant she was done running, but here she was, bags packed, ready to bolt at the first sign of fear. What was the point of saying you'd changed if you just kept making the same choices? Slowly, deliberately, Evelyn picked up the bag and turned it upside down. Clothes spilled onto the bed in a messy heap. There, she said, unpacked. Noah launched himself at her, wrapping his small arms around her waist and holding on like he was afraid she'd disappear anyway. Evelyn held him tight, pressing her face against his hair. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I scared you. Don't do it again, he said, his voice muffled against her shirt. I'll try not to. Promise. Noah, I can't promise I won't get scared. Then promise you'll tell us when you're scared, instead of just packing and leaving. Evelyn looked at Lydia, who nodded in agreement. Okay, Evelyn said. I promise. If I get scared again, I'll tell you. I won't just run. Noah pulled back to look at her. You'll tell Pa too? Yes. Even if you think he'll be mad? Even then. He seemed satisfied with this. He climbed down and took Lydia's hand. Can we have breakfast now? I'm hungry. Yeah. Lydia looked at Evelyn. You coming? It was a simple question with 1,000 layers of meaning underneath. Yeah, Evelyn said. I'm coming. They left the room together, Noah chattering about the cat and Lydia walking with the careful dignity of someone who'd just won a battle they'd been terrified of losing. Evelyn followed them to the kitchen, where Grant was standing by the stove with a spatula in his hand and a slightly panicked expression on his face. I was trying to make eggs, he said, but I think I broke them. You can't break eggs, Lydia said. Well, I did. They're broken, completely ruined. Evelyn looked at the pan. The eggs were fine, scrambled, but fine. Grant's eyes met hers, and she saw the fear there. The knowledge that something had happened, something involving that bag she'd been packing, something that had sent his children to handle without him. I'll fix them, she said quietly. She took the spatula from him, and their fingers touched briefly. He didn't let go immediately. We okay? He asked, his voice low enough that the children wouldn't hear. Getting there. Need to talk about it? Later, after the kids are in bed. He nodded and stepped back, letting her take over the stove. But she felt his eyes on her as she finished the eggs, as she set the table, as she sat down with the family and pretended everything was normal. The rest of the day passed in a strange sort of quiet. The children seemed determined to stay close to Evelyn, following her from room to room like they were afraid she'd disappear if they looked away. Even the cat seemed more clingy than usual, winding around Evelyn's ankles and meowing plaintively whenever she moved. Grant worked outside but came in for lunch instead of eating in the barn. Came in again mid-afternoon to get water and stayed to help Lydia with her reading lesson. Kept finding excuses to be nearby, watching Evelyn with worried eyes. That night, after the children were finally asleep, Evelyn found him on the porch again. It was becoming their place, she realized. The spot where they had the conversations that mattered. So, he said as she sat down, want to tell me what happened this morning? I panicked. I figured that much out. Why? Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, trying to find the right words. Because I finally admitted I wanted this, wanted you, wanted the kids, wanted this life. And the minute I admitted it, some part of my brain decided I needed to run before it could be taken away. That makes sense to you? Not even a little bit, but it's what happened. Grant reached over and took her hand. What changed? What made you unpack? Lydia. And Noah. Evelyn's throat tightened. Noah asked if I was leaving because I didn't love them anymore. And Lydia told me to stop waiting for everything to fall apart and just be here. Smart kids. Terrifyingly smart. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Grant said, I need to tell you something. What? When Caroline died, I made myself a promise. I promised I'd never put the kids through that kind of loss again. That I'd never bring someone into their lives who might leave. That I'd keep us small and self-contained and safe. But then you showed up, and I broke that promise without even thinking about it, because you were helping and I was desperate, and I didn't think about what it would do to them if you left. He turned to look at her. And then today, when Lydia came running to tell me you were packing, I realized I'd done exactly what I'd sworn I wouldn't do. I'd let them love someone who might disappear. Evelyn's chest hurt. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, just listen. Grant's hand tightened on hers. Lydia told me what she said to you, about being tired of watching you be amazing and then talk about yourself like you're worthless. And she's right. But it's my fault too. How is it your fault? Because I've been so focused on not pushing you, on giving you space and time and freedom to choose, that I haven't actually told you what you mean to us, haven't made it clear that you're not just someone we're tolerating until something better comes along. You're the person we want, the person we chose, the person we love. Grant, let me finish. Took a breath. Evelyn Mercer, you are stubborn and sharp-tongued, and you have terrible self-esteem, and you panic at the worst possible times. You're also the strongest, kindest, most frustratingly brave person I've ever met. You saved my family, not by being perfect, not by knowing all the answers, just by showing up and refusing to leave even when leaving would have been easier. Evelyn's eyes were burning. I almost left today. But you didn't. You unpacked. You stayed. And that matters more than the fact that you got scared in the first place. What if I get scared again? Then we'll deal with it, together, the way families do. The word settled between them. Family. Not someday. Not eventually. Now. I don't know how to do this, Evelyn whispered. How to be part of a family again. How to trust that it's real and it's going to last. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. What if we mess it up? Then we'll mess it up together. But Evelyn, I'd rather mess this up with you than do everything perfectly alone. She laughed, a wet, shaky sound. That might be the least romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Yeah, well, I'm not good at romance. I'm good at mucking out stalls and fixing fences and burning dinner. But I love you, and I want to build a life with you. And I'm asking you to stop looking for the exit and just be here. With me. With the kids. With this messy, imperfect family that somehow works despite everything. Evelyn looked at him through her tears, at this man who'd let her into his life when he had every reason to keep her out, who'd defended her against gossip and stayed by her side through fever and never once made her feel like she was anything less than enough. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay. I'll stop looking for the exit. I'll stay. I'll be here. I'll be part of this family. Grant's face broke into a smile. Yeah? Yeah. He pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, tucking her head under his chin and breathing in the smell of him, soap and sweat, and the faint scent of horses. There's one more thing, he said after a moment. What? I meant what I said before, about asking you properly when we were both ready. He pulled back slightly to look at her. I think I'm ready now. Evelyn's heart started pounding. Grant, I'm not asking tonight, not like this, with you still shaky from this morning and both of us exhausted. But soon. I want to ask you soon, and I need to know if that's something you want too, or if I should wait longer, or if... She kissed him. It was clumsy and unexpected and cut off his rambling perfectly. When she pulled back, he looked dazed. Was that a yes? He asked. That was a ask me and find out. That's not very clear. I know, but it's all I've got right now. He laughed and pulled her close again. They sat there together, wrapped in each other's arms, while the night settled around them and the house creaked and the world kept turning. Inside, the children slept. The cat probably prowled. The stove burned low. Everything was messy and imperfect and uncertain. And Evelyn finally let herself believe it was exactly what she wanted. 2 weeks later, Samuel showed up again. Evelyn was in the garden, a new project she'd started, coaxing vegetables out of the stubborn soil, when she heard the horse approaching. She looked up to see Grant's brother dismounting, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Mercer, he said. Samuel. She stood up, wiping dirt off her hands. Grant's in the north pasture. Actually, I came to talk to you. Evelyn's stomach tightened. About what? Samuel looked uncomfortable. He took off his hat and turned it in his hands, not meeting her eyes. I owe you an apology, he said finally. Whatever Evelyn had been expecting, it wasn't that. For what? For what I said last time I was here. About you taking advantage, about you leaving and hurting everyone. He looked up at her. I was wrong. You were protecting your family, I understand that. No, I was being an ass, and I was being unfair to you and to Grant. He took a breath. I came by last week. Didn't go to the house, just watched from the road. Saw you teaching Lydia in the garden. Saw Noah following you around like a puppy. Saw Grant come home early just to sit on the porch with you. You were spying on us? Yeah. And I saw something I didn't expect to see. What? A family. A real one. Not people playing roles or going through motions, but an actual family that worked. That fit together. Samuel's voice was rough. Grant's different than he was before you came. The kids are different. The whole place feels different. And I realized that I was so busy protecting him from getting hurt again that I didn't notice he was already dead inside. You didn't kill him. You brought him back to life. Evelyn's throat went tight. I just helped with the house. No, you did a lot more than that. Samuel put his hat back on. So I'm apologizing for being wrong about you, for making assumptions, for not seeing what was right in front of me. Apology accepted. And I'm asking you to forgive Grant, too, for not standing up to me sooner, for not defending you the way he should have. He did defend me, multiple times. But he let me plant doubts, let me make you feel like you didn't belong, and that's on both of us. Evelyn studied Samuel's face. He looked sincere, genuinely sorry, not just going through the motions, but actually meaning it. You really love your brother, she said. He's all the family I've got left besides the kids. When Caroline died and he started falling apart, I thought I could fix it by pushing him to move on faster, to hire help, to find a new wife. But you can't fix grief by rushing through it. You just have to survive it until it gets smaller. Yeah, you do. Samuel looked at her for a long moment. You've been through it too. Grief. My husband died 3 years ago. I'm sorry. Me too. But I'm learning that being sorry doesn't mean you can't be happy again. It just means you carry both at the same time. Grant's lucky to have you. I think it might be the other way around. Samuel almost smiled. My brother has terrible taste in coffee and can't cook to save his life, and he works too much and forgets to sleep. But he's a good man. He'll take care of you if you let him. I know. Good. Samuel started to turn toward his horse, then paused. One more thing. The way he looks at you, that's not gratitude or convenience. That's love. Real love. The kind that sticks around even when things get hard. Evelyn's eyes stung. How can you tell? Butsu, because it's the same way he looked at Caroline. And I never thought I'd see him look at anyone that way again. Then he was gone, riding off down the road without looking back. Evelyn stood in the garden for a long time after he left, her hands covered in dirt, her heart full of something she was finally ready to call hope. That night at dinner, Lydia dropped the question that had clearly been building for weeks. They were eating beef stew, actual beef, from a cow Grant had traded with a neighbor, and cornbread, and the meal was chaotic in the way family dinners always were. Noah was talking with his mouth full. The cat was begging under the table. Grant was trying to convince Lydia to eat her vegetables. Then, into a brief lull in the conversation, Lydia said, "If you stay forever, do you become our mother?" The room went silent. Noah stopped mid-chew. The cat froze. Grant's fork clattered against his plate. Evelyn looked at Lydia's face, at the careful neutrality there, the way she was trying so hard to seem casual about a question that clearly mattered more than anything. Evelyn stopped, started again. I would never try to replace your mother. Caroline was your mother. She'll always be your mother. I know that. Lydia's voice was patient. But she's gone. And you're here. And you take care of us like mothers do. So I'm asking if that makes you our mother too, or if you're something else. Evelyn looked at Grant for help, but he just gave her a small, encouraging nod. This was her question to answer. What do you want me to be? She asked Lydia. I want you to stay. I want you to keep teaching me things and making dinner and being here when I wake up. I want Noah to stop worrying that you're going to disappear. I want Pa to keep smiling the way he does when you're around. Lydia took a breath. And I want to call you something that means you're ours and we're yours. But I don't know what that is. Evelyn's vision blurred with tears. What if I'm not good enough at it? What if I mess up? Everyone messes up. Mama messed up sometimes too. She burned dinner and got impatient and forgot things. Lydia's voice was steady. But she loved us, and you love us too. I can tell. I do love you so much. Then that's enough. The rest we can figure out. Noah had been quiet through this whole exchange, but now he spoke up. So can we call you Ma? Evelyn looked at their faces. At Lydia's careful hope, and Noah's open expectation, and Grant's barely contained emotion. If that's what you want, if that feels right to you, then yes. Noah beamed. Ma. I like it. It's shorter than Evie anyway. Lydia's face broke into a smile that transformed her whole face. Ma it is then. Just like that? It was decided. Evelyn was Ma. Not Mother, which belonged to Caroline. Not Evelyn, which was too formal for family. Just Ma. Simple and perfect and theirs. Grant reached across the table and took Evelyn's hand. His eyes were wet, and when he spoke his voice was rough. "Welcome to the family," he said. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the dishes were done and the house had settled into quiet, Grant found Evelyn standing at the window of her room. She still thought of it as her room, even though she knew that was about to change. "You okay?" he asked from the doorway. "I don't know. I think so. Maybe." "That's convincing." She turned to face him. "Your children just decided I'm their mother. That's huge. That's permanent. That's scary? Terrifying. Good thing you're brave then." "I'm not brave. I'm terrified and second-guessing everything and wondering if I'm about to ruin their lives." Grant crossed the room and took her hands. "You know what Lydia told me tonight after we tucked them in?" "What?" "She said she was glad Caroline was her mama, but she was also glad you're her ma, because it means she gets to have two people who love her instead of just memories of one." Evelyn's breath caught. "She said that?" "Word for word, and then she asked if you were going to marry me so it would be official." "What did you say?" "I said I was working on it." Despite everything, Evelyn laughed. "Working on it? Well, I can't exactly propose without a ring, can I?" "You don't need a ring." "Maybe not, but I want to do this properly. Want to give you something that says, I thought about this, I planned for this, I want this to be real and permanent and official." Evelyn looked up at him. "You really want to marry me?" "More than I've wanted anything in years. Even though I'm difficult and scared and I panic and try to run. Even though. Maybe even because of it. Because it means when you choose to stay, I know it's real. I know you mean it. I do mean it. I'm done running. I know. But I also know you're going to have days when you're tempted. Days when the fear gets loud again. And I want you to know that when those days come, we'll get through them together. You, me, and the kids. As a family." "A family?" Evelyn repeated softly. "I haven't had one of those in a long time." "Well, you do now, for keeps." He kissed her then, slow and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Evelyn was crying again, but this time it didn't feel like sadness. It felt like release, like finally letting go of all the fear and doubt and self-hatred she'd been carrying for 3 years. "When are you going to ask me?" she said. "Officially?" "When I have a ring, when the moment's right, when I can do it without the kids interrupting or the cow needing milking or the stove catching fire." "So never then." He laughed. "Probably, but I'll do my best." The moment came 3 weeks later on an ordinary Tuesday that had nothing special about it except that it was theirs. Grant had gone into town alone that morning, saying he had business to take care of. He came back around noon with packages he wouldn't let anyone see and a secretive smile that made Noah suspicious and Lydia knowing. That evening, after dinner, he asked Evelyn to walk with him. They left the children with strict instructions to stay inside and walked out to the small rise behind the house, where you could see the whole ranch spread out below. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and orange and red. "This is where I used to come," Grant said quietly, "after Caroline died. When I needed to think or cry or just be alone for a minute. Why are we here now?" "Because this is where I realized I was ready to stop being alone." He turned to face her. "I came up here about a month after you arrived. Stood right here and tried to convince myself that having you in the house was temporary, that I shouldn't get attached, that I was just using you for help and it didn't mean anything more than that. But even then, I knew I was lying to myself. Because when I thought about you leaving, when I tried to imagine the house without you in it, it felt wrong, empty, like losing Caroline all over again, except different. Because losing Caroline was losing my past. Losing you would be losing my future." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Grant, let me finish. I'm not good at this, and I practiced what I was going to say, and if I stop now, I'll forget it all." He took a breath. "You walked into my life at the worst possible time. I was broken, and my kids were barely surviving, and my house was falling apart, and I had nothing to offer you except hard work and uncertainty. You should have kept walking, should have left us to our mess. But you didn't. You stayed. You fed my children and warmed my house, and somehow made a family out of 4 people who'd forgotten how to be one. I didn't do it alone. No, you didn't. We all did it together. But you're the one who made it possible. You're the one who showed up when we needed someone and then kept showing up every day after. You're the one who taught Lydia to laugh again and gave Noah something to hold on to and reminded me what it felt like to want to come home. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. This isn't fancy. It's not gold or diamonds or anything that cost more than I could afford. It's just a ring that belonged to my grandmother, who spent 50 years married to a man she met when she was 16 and loved until the day he died. My mother gave it to me years ago and told me to save it for someone special, someone who'd understand what it meant. He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver band with a small blue stone set in the middle. Evelyn Mercer, you are stubborn and scared, and you don't believe you deserve good things, even though you're one of the best people I know. You drive me crazy and make me laugh, and you love my children like they're yours, and somehow you made me believe in second chances. He dropped to one knee. Will you marry me? Will you stay here and be part of this family and let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you've made us? Evelyn looked down at him, at this man who'd seen her at her worst and chosen her anyway, who'd defended her against gossip and stayed by her side through fever and never once made her feel like she was less than enough. Yes, she whispered. Yeah? Yes. I'll marry you. I'll stay. I'll be yours and you'll be mine, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. Grant's face broke into a smile so wide it looked like it hurt. He stood up and slipped the ring onto her finger. It was slightly too large, but she didn't care. And then he was kissing her while the sun set behind them and the ranch spread out below, and somewhere in the house their children were probably watching through the window. When they finally pulled apart, Grant was laughing. What? Evelyn asked. I was so nervous, practiced that speech 20 times. Was sure I was going to mess it up. You did fine. I forgot half of what I meant to say. The important parts made it through. He kissed her again, softer this time. I love you. I love you too. They stood there for a while, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the last of the sun disappear. Then they walked back to the house hand in hand, ready to tell the children that their family was about to become official. Lydia took one look at Evelyn's face and said, He asked? He asked. And you said yes? I said yes. Noah whooped and launched himself at them both, nearly knocking them over. The cat yowled in protest at the commotion. Lydia tried to maintain her dignity for about 3 seconds before giving up and joining the hug. They stood there in a tangle of arms and tears and laughter, 4 people who'd been broken and lost and had somehow found each other and built something new. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. There would be hard days ahead, days when Evelyn got scared again. Days when the children missed Caroline. Days when Grant worked too much and forgot to talk. Days when money was tight and the ranch was struggling and nothing seemed to go right. But they'd face those days together, as a family. And that made all the difference. The wedding happened 6 weeks later in the parlor of the ranch house with just the children and Samuel as witnesses. The circuit judge came out from town and performed the ceremony in less than 10 minutes. Evelyn wore a simple blue dress that Lydia had helped her sew. Grant wore his best shirt and pants that he'd pressed himself. Noah held the cat through the whole ceremony, and the animal tolerated it with remarkable patience. When the judge pronounced them married, Lydia started crying. Noah cheered. Samuel clapped Grant on the back. The cat jumped out of Noah's arms and stalked off to find somewhere quieter. And Evelyn Mercer became Evelyn Hale, officially part of the family she'd chosen and who'd chosen her back. That night, after the judge had left and Samuel had ridden home and the children were finally asleep, Evelyn and Grant sat on the porch together. She was wearing the ring that had belonged to his grandmother. He had his arm around her shoulders. Everything was quiet and still and perfect in its imperfection. We did it, Grant said. We did. You're stuck with us now. I know. No more running. No more running, Evelyn agreed. Then, softer. Thank you. For what? For seeing me, for wanting me, for giving me a reason to stop being afraid. Grant pulled her closer. Thank you for staying, for choosing us, for being brave enough to let yourself have this. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Evelyn said, You know what's strange? What? That first night, when I heard Noah crying and stopped at your house, I almost kept walking. I was so close to just ignoring it and moving on. What made you stop? I don't know. Maybe I was just tired of running. Maybe some part of me knew I needed this as much as you did. Or maybe it was just chance, luck, being in the right place at the wrong time. Or the wrong place at the right time. Or that. She smiled. Either way, I'm glad I stopped. Me too. From inside the house came a small sound. Noah, probably having a dream. A moment later, footsteps. Lydia getting up to check on her brother. The soft murmur of voices. Then silence again. They're good kids, Evelyn said. They're your kids now too. Yeah, they are. It still felt strange to say it. Strange, but right. Like a truth she'd been denying for months finally being spoken aloud. Grant stood up and held out his hand. Come on, Mrs. Hale. Let's go to bed. Mrs. Hale, Evelyn repeated, testing the name. That's going to take some getting used to. You've got the rest of your life to practice. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They stood there for a moment, looking out at the ranch that was now legally hers as much as his, at the land they'd worked together, the life they'd build together, the future they'd face together. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It wasn't the life she'd thought she deserved, but it was hers. And that was more than enough. Years later, when people asked how she and Grant met, Evelyn would tell them the simple version, that she was passing through and heard a child crying and stopped to help, that she stayed longer than planned, that they fell in love and built a life together. She never mentioned the fear, the running, the way she'd packed her bags and nearly left. The nights she'd lain awake convinced she didn't deserve any of this. Those parts were private, sacred, the struggles that made the happiness worth having. But sometimes, when Lydia brought her own children to visit, or when Noah told stories about growing up on the ranch, or when she and Grant sat on the porch watching the sunset, Evelyn would remember being the woman who walked past crying children because getting involved wasn't worth the risk, would remember choosing to stop, choosing to help, choosing to stay even when staying was the scariest thing she'd ever done, would remember learning that belonging wasn't something you earned through perfection. It was something you claimed by showing up, doing the work, and letting yourself be loved despite all the reasons you thought you shouldn't be. And she'd look at the life she'd built, messy and imperfect and absolutely real, and think that maybe, just maybe, the best things in life were the ones that scared you most. The ones that required you to be brave enough to stop running and let yourself be caught. The ones that started with a crying child and a stranger at the door and a choice to stay instead of go. The ones that taught you that family wasn't about blood or perfection or knowing all the answers. It was about showing up, staying, loving people through their worst moments and letting them love you through yours. It was about being brave enough to want things again, to hope again, to believe that even broken people could build something beautiful together. And in the end, that was the only story that mattered. The story of a widow who stopped running and found home.